Mouse.
Okay.
I like Mouse.
No, Mouse is fine.
Wait a second. We're not talking about how Mouse ruined comics this week. We're talking about how Civil War ruined comics. And to do that, welcome to another Wednesday, to another Mattriarchy. I am your host, Matt Rhys, coming to you from, it's a little chilly. Scotts Bluff, Nebraska is today. It's winter is caught up to us finally. After like 3 Indian summers, it's finally gotten cold. How are you guys doing?
Isn't it great?
Oh yeah. I am joined today by the ever mysterious Cartoonicus.
Stay tuned.
Yeah. I also, as per usual, Twitless.
Are we live this time?
We are live
Yes,
this
we are
time,
live.
All right.
and our special last minute expert, the Metal.
I'm an expert in many things. I don't know about this particular topic, but I do have things to weigh in.
Yeah. So here, to let you guys know a little of the background story, a little bit of the secret behind the scenes. This is the third time I didn't hit the go live right. I mean, that it took to get it. The third time was the charm, though. So there you go. We had rehearsals.
Just like with Civil War.
Oh my goodness, that's actually that's kind of spicy. That's kind of spicy right there. I like it though. I like it. So this was a special requested show, guys. Twitless specifically said, "I want to talk about how much I hate Civil War."
Was that me? Okay.
Yeah. And I also hate Civil War, so I thought it was a good fit. In fact, I'm going to give myself the whole screen here to talk about this little second here. I hate Civil War so much that I went through this book, and I got this out of like a dollar bin, right? I got this, and every time the characters say or do something that's out of character, I circled it in black Sharpie. And at first, I started reading through it, and I got so mad I just hurled it clean across the room. And I said, no, I need something a little more organized. So about on every page, I guess that one doesn't have one. There's some place where, here we go. There's Captain America saying something stupid, and over here's I can't remember what it was. Somebody busting a thing over somebody else's head. I think that's Matt Murdock getting busted in the head. But anyway, point is I was so mad. I was so mad. I went full on rage feast on the thing. But that was years ago. And I'm sort of kind of over it now. Sort of kind of. Also,
Over it enough that we're about to.
Well, no, I didn't. That's fine.
You're over it enough that we're about to spend another 2 hours talking about it.
We'll spend as long as it takes. It may not take a full 2 hours. We'll just have to play it by ear. So, Twitless, what was your impetus for wanting to do this topic? Since this was your idea, this particular iteration was your idea.
Yeah, it's your fault that we're here.
Gee, I forgot it was me. I think partly it's because Rhys and I, we do see eye to eye on some things, but on others, like certain comics, for example, Kingdom Come, we have really different opinions on.
Oh yeah,
and that's an upcoming show at some point.
Yeah, it'll be the new year though,
and it'll be a good one too.
I'll sit down and read over Christmas again.
Yeah. So there are certain comics that we read very differently, but Civil War was something that we were like, you know what, this is terrible. And so I reread it, and I think I at this point I have the most generous take I could possibly have towards it, and I still say that it's I still hate it. So my opinion hasn't changed that much. But let me actually show you kind of why I hate, one of the main reasons I hate this book and why it's actually stuck with me. So I've got, give me a second, I'm gonna share my screen here. One of the first, because back in the small town I grew up in, we didn't really have a very easily accessible comic book store. So a lot of the books that I started reading, I read in the local library. And one of the early books I read was The New Warriors. This is from 2005, and they had a collected trade edition in my local library. And if you just take a look at this this artwork here, you can see this is kind of a it's a limited series, but it's a kind of a lighter tone for a book, especially with the artwork as well. And I actually do want to share one more image here because it's actually very, very telling. Well,
and on the tack of that, I think the New Warriors thing is important, right? Because I want to
It
go
is
back
very-
to because I'm about 10 years older than Twitless, right? So when I was first getting into comics, I didn't buy the New Warriors, but it's one of those that I flipped through to keep up on it because it affected the continuity of other books that I read, right? And New Warriors was a lot like Teen Titans, right? It was fun, it was vibrant, it had serious superhero action, but everybody tried. I mean, they were sincere. There was sincerity to it. So the fun that was in there, the funny that was in there, was because people were making funny jokes. They had this banter between them. And not
very
everybody
useful.
got along always, but it was a lot of that teen superhero dramedy that factors into it. But like everybody was competent at what they did, even if they were young and they had room to grow. They all helped each other out. And so Night Thrasher and Speedball and Namora and these guys, they helped each other out, and then they were something bigger than the sum of their parts. So that was one of those things, like that's an intrinsic part of what the New Warriors were. They were like they were kind of like they'd have that team feel, but they were kind of in that same rank as like the Iron Fist and
Defenders.
the Defenders, but they were the young people version of that same kind of low key street level kind of thing.
And it really sounds like everything we loved about Teen Titans the show.
Oh, absolutely.
Hold on. Okay. So I want to start this off by saying that like the New Warrior series that I picked up in the library starts off with this the team kind of finding some supervillains in just like suburbia, and they're doing it for a reality TV show. But you'll see we have Speedball here, and he gets punched by a tiger shark or somebody, and there's a little bit of like, oh, LOL, reality TV show, because that sort of thing was kind of picking up in the 2000s, or was kind of newer around that time. So there's I would say just a little dash of satire here, but you'll notice the tone of this book was very light and mostly positive, with, like I said, a little bit of a satire there. So one of the reasons why, and I liked this book because it had characters I didn't really know. I was a Namora, and you had Speedball. These characters if you're
technically Namorita. It was
I was gonna say it was Namorita, right? Yeah, okay.
Namor. It's like Namor's niece.
Yeah. So you have Namorita. We've got Nova actually here, who actually is a bit of a bigger name, but Speedball, and then a Night Thrasher. And these were characters that if you gain most of your Marvel knowledge from just kind of normal, like the TV series and stuff, you wouldn't know who these characters were. So I didn't. And that allowed me to kind of, discover new characters and have fun with that. And I really did enjoy this series, and it touched on the regular Marvel universe, but it did it very tangentially. So one point, I think they run into the Mad Thinkers robots, and so like there were things that touched on the Marvel universe, but it was kind of ancillary. Dave, before I move on, Dave says, "I don't need your Civil War. It feeds the rich while it buries the poor." And I had totally dipped out of comics at this point, so I'm learning. Cool. Well, unfortunately, this is where things turn a bit sour, because I enjoyed this series, six-issue miniseries. And then this series is actually used as the impetus for Mark Miller to kick off Civil War. And he takes the characters that you see on screen and he brutally murders them. And
and it's not just that he brutally murders them, right? So one of the setups, and I'm going to spoil the beginning, the first like 2 pages in. 2 pages in. So Speedball, a little background on Speedball. And I should have looked it up ahead of time because I can't remember the exact origin of his powers. But basically, he absorbs and redirects kinetic energy. And so the faster he moves, the more he moves. And he's able, and he's got like a force field around him that allows him to bounce around stuff so he doesn't injure himself, right? And so he's hyper acrobatic. And as when he was first the thing, he didn't have a lot of control over it. He didn't have any control over how the momentum was transferred. And so there was some humor back in the 90s that was built in the fact that he's learning how to use these powers, right? But he was a little silly as a person. He's kind of a goofy guy, but he was really like serious about being a hero, right? I mean, he wanted to help people, right? He was like, you know, he's kind of a goof as a guy, but he's got these motives that make him excel young. And hello, Fizz. And so what the thing about it is second page in, he's being petty. Speedball
I got an image for you. I got it pulled up. So this is very interesting because remember when I said the beginning of the other series is them approaching a house with some villains in it. It's the exact same opening from the 2005 series in terms of them approaching a house with villains in it. Except if you can pull up the image I've got shared now.
Okay.
It's exactly what you're talking about, Rhys. So take a look.
This is my first circle in the book.
Uh-huh.
That one right there. It's the same scene. There you go. That big
yeah, so Speedball is he's a little bit into the reality TV show in the 2005 series. So he's not necessarily the bright-eyed, like bushy-tailed thing. I think maybe like when didn't Ditko come up with Speedball?
I don't remember for sure. I'd have to let me look it up while you're talking.
So he's an older character. And so like in the 2005 series, they made him kind of like, you know, more of a contemporary teen. But when Mark Millar gets his hands on him, look at this character with his evil grin on his face. And it's like immediately the tone, you'll see a tonal clash. And like I said before, it's the exact same opening of, hey, villains in a house. But as opposed to the earlier piece that you saw just now, which had this cartoonish look and things were played for fun, where is it? Very quickly, it becomes, here we go.
Yeah, this is created by Ditko in 1988.
Yeah. And at this moment right here, you'll notice that as opposed to the previous series from 2005, which was kind of light and colorful and, you know, a little bit sarcastic, but not as and satirical, but not like super cynical. But Mark Millar, because he's a bit of a cynical guy, I'd say, he immediately, holy, you know, bleep. And just the tone of this work is immediately pretty much the polar opposite, while basically copying the exact same scenes beat for beat. In addition to that, I'm going to pull up another shot here in just a second. This scene plays out like this. So same scene as, like I said, the 2005 series, but then this happens. And this is kind of a moment. This is a watershed moment, I think, for the Marvel mainstream universe right here. And this is a moment that really, really stuck with me as being just, I don't know, this one stuck with me. This is Nitro, and he's getting punched and stuff. And then he just like pulls a nuke and kills like all the new warriors from that series, essentially, and murders like what, hundreds of kids.
Yeah. It takes out like a 12-block radius, right? It's this huge thing. Maybe not 12. I can't remember the exact number, but it doesn't even matter.
All right, so in chat, we got James Hayes. He says, hello, Rhys, Twitless Metal, Cartoonicus, everyone hanging out in the chat. Hope that you're doing good and feeling well tonight. And Fizzocho says, Civil War supposedly started the trend of Marvel having its heroes fight on each other, but really Civil War made Marvel obsessed with recreating it.
Yeah. Well, and like, let's talk about that real quick. First of all, hello, Neville. That's a hilarious comment, and I'm going to give it some highlights. First of all, this one, the thing about it is, if you go back to the Marvel age, back to early Stan Lee stuff, once he starts building the universe, they had a cliche called the Marvel misunderstanding, where you'd have a hero, and he'd be doing hero stuff, and then the guest hero would show up, and they didn't know each other, so they think, oh, you're wearing a fancy outfit, you have powers, and then they'd fight, then they'd realize that, or they both try to stop the same hero, and one would mistake, or same villain, and one would mistake one hero for the compatriot of the villain or whatever else. They'd have a big brawl. The villain would get away. They'd realize they were in the wrong, and that's the end of Act 1. And then you've got your ads, and then you pick up on Act 2, and they're working together. And that was like the cliche of how it was almost always done. Mm-hmm. So Marvel heroes fighting each other. DC did that a little bit, and if you go look over it at Charlton, they mimic that some in stuff. But like that was just like a par for the course for Marvel. And so like Marvel heroes fighting each other has always been part of the deal, and it's kind of a love thing. It's kind of a loving attribute to throw that in there because it's a nod to the past. But I think you're 100% right that one of the big differences is here is this isn't the Marvel misunderstanding, because at this point in Marvel history, everybody knows everyone else. So it's not like, I think you're a villain because I don't know who you are, and then I find out who you are and your motives are clear, and so we can, unite with those to do a right. I would, to quote Frederick Douglass, I would unite with anyone to do a right and no one to do a wrong. Right. So that's the concept in here. And in here we're just having what if the heroes disagree about what right and wrong is?
So I'm actually kind of okay with maybe that point, but I will say that this moment right here is what I call I'm not saying it's the only time this has happened, by the way, but for me, this is when I confronted a story that had tonal death. And by that I mean death to the tone of the superhero story and the superhero narrative. Mm-hmm. Normally, superheroes they shoot lasers out of their eyes. Explosions happen, but they happen in a space, a narrative space, kind of not unlike when kids are playing cops and robbers, or when we watch fiction on TV, where it's like this sort of bloodless carnage. In this case here, we have a story that takes a very different take on the Marvel universe, but puts it into the mainstream. And like I said, a tonal death. In this case, Nitro's been a character for years, but now all of a sudden when he blows up, he's taken out it's like a terrorist attack. It's just like a nuclear bomb going off. And suddenly the heroes have to deal with that. And like I said, this story, it's hard for me to, if I were to say anything positive about Civil War, it's the fact that it's a story with very interesting ideas. And the ideas in the story, notice I say ideas, I think are well executed. I think this is an awful, terrible superhero book. See, and I think I
would disagree that even the element that they're well executed, because they're fundamentally misunderstood. Right? They're misunderstood alongst the same way.
I agree with that.
They're misunderstood alongst the exact same way that Pierce Morgan doesn't understand the Second Amendment. For the exact same reasons, Mark Miller doesn't understand the Marvel Universe.
Let me re-clarify what I mean by ideas. So, in terms of ignore this as a Marvel book for a second, because like I said, I think the fact this is a Marvel book really ruins this. But imagine a story, and again, Mark Miller is a talented writer. I've read stuff of his that I've liked. But imagine a story where you're trying to represent two sides of a debate, and you're trying to be as even-handed as possible with that. I think Mark Miller ultimately delivers on that. He does not portray one side as really inherently superior to the other, and he reinforces multiple times that there's really two valid perspectives on a very controversial issue. And I have to give him credit, because a lot of lesser writers would be utterly incapable of representing any sort of debate with nuance. But later on, when we get Doctor Strange, who says there's two sides to this issue, one side of the debate technically wins, but it's a very hollow victory. And everything afterwards is very, very hollow, which again has its own problems. But in terms of showing a debate between two sides, Mark Miller is doing, I would say, a pretty decent job, whereas modern writers, I think, would screw this concept up very, very a lot. Setting all that aside, in terms of this being a superhero story, it's like the worst thing I've ever read. So I have those two ideas at the same time. I'm like, okay, Mark Miller took two sides of a debate, and he did his best to kind of give both of them, weight. He shows like the good, and he tries to show the positives and the cons of two sides of an issue. The weird part is the fact that he never actually shows the debate. The characters just spit one-liners around the debate.
Boy, is that true.
But the idea of the debate is still there.
And that's why I think you actually just disproved your premise previously. Like, it's not well done.
Right.
It's exactly like when people try to, I'm going to get a little political for a second because it's my damn show. But like when people are like, oh, why do we have to be so upset? I mean, you think abortion is cool, and I think abortion is not cool. Why do we have to fight about it? Well, it's because we're talking about murder. That's the question. Is like for the anti-abortion side of the argument is the belief is that this is murder, and murder is not acceptable in any circumstance. So, like, that's off the table. Like, those are two opinions that can't have a middle ground, right? But the all the college sophomores, and all the horny dudes, 20-something dudes in there want to don't want to have a debate about the substantive issue because it's going to get in the way of what they they're going to have to take a stand on.
So to be fair here, the issue here is it's not a real issue. It's an issue though that relates to things, and again, that's another kind of credit I would give here because the debate here is vigilantism. It's based and it's pretending as if vigilantism were a real issue, and people were actually. It's like imagine if in real life, people with powers or weapons started running around and doing what they think is right, and it's like what. That would be a controversial issue. And so he, and like I said, to be fair, he doesn't come out and say, this is the right side. And he tries to show Cap on one side and his acolytes and Iron Man on the other side. And like I said, that's where I was like, okay, I can kind of see what you're doing here and give you some credit for it. And like I said, that's about as generous as I can be to this, what's going on in this story is like I said, I think some of the ideas, behind it, I can see what is being attempted, and I can give that some credit. Like I said before, what's really weird is that for a superhero story that's about a supposed debate, they don't ever really have the debate. They just kind of talk around it, which is kind of a big flaw.
Which is part of, like, actually Neville points that out. They never even talk about what the Registration Act entails.
Correct, yeah. And they never really sit down and actually have, which like I said, spoilers to people, this is one of the rare instances where the MCU film did it way better. So Civil War, the film, is actually way better than the comic. At least
actually, oddly enough, there was something that did it even better than either of them, because I even have my own criticisms about the film. But the game, Marvel Ultimate Alliance 2, was basically completely set around the Civil War. And what you got to do is you got to talk to the individual characters as you're playing through both sides. And you get to see like what their opinions are on things. You have like these interactions with them. You can even like pick responses to them. And it actually turns something that I think is honestly a very shallow story to begin with. I don't think he does a very good job of painting both sides. One side he paints way better than the other, but the game does a much better job of painting both sides in a very generous light.
All right, so let me actually prompt you on that. Which side do you think is being painted here as better than the other?
Oh, Cap side for sure. Like I don't even think it's close the way he paints.
I think it's actually I think that like I actually think that that's not entirely correct, because I think they're painting Tony's side as intellectually correct and Cap's side is emotionally correct. And that's why Cap at the end, they make Cap a moron. He's a stupid man, and he's never recovered from there ever since. This story is the absolute death of Captain America. This is the end of the story. He's never been treated with respect since then.
He does actually die after this.
But
so
if I may, the crazy. Oh, you're cutting in and out there. Is that you or me?
I think it's you. Yeah, I can hear Rhys fine.
Oh, dear. Okay.
But you may.
I kicked my desk, so that may have been a factor.
Oh, maybe. If I may, I think it's even more convoluted than that, because number one, the entire time we see both sides doing really, really awful things. I know Logan hates Linkara, but I'm going to quote a line from him here where he said, "So a point of a civil war is both sides are right and both sides are wrong. What we ended up with in Civil War is both sides are wrong and I hate them."
I could see some, like when some of the arguments were being made, when characters actually made points, there was some interesting ones being made. For example, Mr. Fantastic makes a point about, hey, like I've done some calculations, smartest guy on earth, and the current I have projections for how bad things are going to get if we don't change the current superhero model. And I'll say, okay, so he's got some data, he's got some reasons to believe what he believes, and then you have Cap saying things like, if we become employees of the government, then the White House gets to tell us who the supervillains are. And that's a really good point, too, which is the fact that the superheroes would then just be a political wing. And so there are certain points that both sides get to make. And the problem is that they're one-liners and not really explored in much depth. Like Metal said, like the video game ends up, other media gets to explore some of these points better. But again, I do have to give Mark Miller enough, just at least enough
when
credit.
They are talking, yes.
Yeah,
but
that's what I was going to say.
The thing is, then you see Tony's side, hauling people off without a trial and throwing them in a negative zone.
Right.
Hiring mass murderers to fight with them.
Oh, that's dumb, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like having absolutely no responsibility in anything they do while they're fighting. Do I have to bring up, Robo Thor, right?
So the character, yeah.
Well, and that's the thing
the levels-
that's the thing is that, and they put the smartest man alive obviously lines with big government, because everybody who's smart thinks the big government is good. But then but then with it, then he creates a robotic Thor that he can't control, who straight up murders people, right? So Mr. Fantastic hasn't been. I haven't seen a good Mr. Fantastic story since Civil War either.
I'm okay with Mr. Fantastic siding with the safety side.
Which
you pointed out,
but everything he does makes things less safe.
I was just about to say that.
Sorry.
The levels
on your line.
The levels of character assassination in this story are both figurative and literal. Because, like I said, the story begins with several lighthearted characters getting just straight up assassinated, where this never happened on this level in the Marvel Universe before, to my knowledge, where it's like, hey, let's take a bunch of teen heroes and just have them blow up a nuclear holocaust that also kills a whole bunch of children.
Right. And we're going to highlight how these veteran heroes, despite their young age, they've been in the superhero game for 5 to 10 years, depending on which one we're talking about. Yeah. But let's go ahead and take these veteran heroes and let's just paint them like they're idiots. And I mean, like, name Rita, for crying out loud. I mean, oh my God.
So this is where I'm going to start criticizing Mark Miller, because this is something he is known for, which is super edgelord writing. Right. If anyone who's read either Kick-Ass or
actually, before we get into that, I realized we jumped way ahead of something that I really wanted to touch on before we got into Civil War itself.
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things we have to remember, right, is that this comes on the tail of two events in Marvel's history that are of the IRL Marvel history that are super important to take into mind, right? So the first was so Marvel went bankrupt and was purchased by Toy Biz, right?
Didn't Marvel and Toy Biz like do the rounds of buying each other out for a while?
It's more involved than that, but basically, but it wasn't. Marvel never had any process to buy out Toy Biz. They licensed their stuff to Toy Biz and were trying to use that money to get solvent again, because Toy Biz was selling so many Marvel action figures, but they weren't able to, and it's a whole thing. Oh, hey, Tyler is here to disagree with me. I love it. So yeah, 1 second, I got a cough.
Every statement you make, you realize.
Oh yes.
He's about to say you don't have to cough.
So, and here's the great thing. So, like, last night I stopped in his channel and I told him, I said it was really great how you disagreed with everything I said, but it did add an extra two hours onto our discussion, so it ended up being a 3 hour stream. Which is only half true. It's only half true. But anyway, so coming out of that, Marvel needed a Hail Mary, and their Hail Mary was the Ultimate Universe. Right? Oh. It was and the Ultimate Universe, which I hated. Right?
I kind of like. I kind of like the Ultimates, but it's hit or miss. It's
Yeah, we'll talk.
Oh,
about
I
the universe
hate
another day.
everything about it.
Okay, we'll have to have this. That sounds like a really good topic for January. Let's keep this in mind. Okay.
All right.
We actually January's stacking up. We've got some fire coming in January, people.
Awesome.
It's gonna be toasty. I just need to write it all down. But anyway, point being, the Ultimate Universe, that was one big thing. And the second was the Jameis era of Marvel, right? So while the Ultimate Universe was going and people were getting excited, people were liking the things because they were just rehashing all of all of Stan Lee's stuff. They're just copycatting Stan Lee, and it was a winning formula. So people were getting interested in Marvel Comics again, and they were offering their digital stuff. And at the same time, Bill Jameis became like the big hoity-toity there in Marvel and released just a series and pushed through just a series of bombs, just bombs. You had the Namor, the YA book, which totally stripped Namor of any of his character and made him to this moony teenager. Oh, it was so bad. They had the Trouble miniseries that was maybe Peter.
Oh gosh,
Peter's
don't
parents,
even
maybe
talk
not,
about that.
right? They had the Sentry, which I guess was people liked the Sentry, but that came out at that same time.
I
They
don't
had
like the
two-gun-
Sentry.
the two gun, not the 2-gun kid, the Rawhide Kid. And they made this big deal about rehashing the Rawhide Kid as a homosexual cowboy in the Old West.
Oh, jeez.
So I mean that all came. And there was a series of things that where the fan base was just really didn't like it, and that's ended up how Joe Q ended up getting his job editorial wise, because Marvel Knights, the imprint that he was had been guiding and overseeing, was doing pretty good, and the Ultimate Universe was doing pretty good, and they the powers that be pushed Jameis out, and Civil War came in. And so the same people that were in charge of the Ultimate Universe and Marvel Knights, the adult themed Marvel books, or Marvel Max stuff, and the Ultimate Universe, the Super Edgelord Ultimate Universe, those guys were the people that were in charge of orchestrating Civil War, right? So,
Was Ben?
That's interesting.
But was Bendis? Because I thought Bendis was one of the big Ultimate guys, and was he?
Oh yeah, he
involved
was.
in-
This before Bendis had a lot of flex though. He was still. I mean, he was Spider-Man. This is before he got beyond that. So when Miller left the Ultimate Universe, I think it was after Civil War. Then Bendis started, getting a little more at that point. Okay. But Bendis had not become Bendis at this point.
So basically, this was the age of putting a twist on everything.
Yes. I mean, and everybody tries to put twists on stuff. I mean, that's
storytelling.
but there's twists that are consistent with character, and there's twists that are not consistent with character.
Right. Yeah, that's one of the biggest casualties of this book is characters acting out of character, and that's so another thing that I thought of when I started thinking about this book was Batman Arkham Asylum, which has again very interesting ideas, but it's also the worst Batman story I've ever read because
Grant Morrison Arkham Asylum,
because it's Batman completely acting nothing like Batman at all.
Yeah, I've not read that. So.
And it's got a bunch of references to mythology. So you're like, oh, hey, the man slaying the dragon. I can see that motif. And then you're like, why is Batman stabbing Killer Croc? So what I'm saying is that you can have interesting ideas, or I would say interesting concepts, and you can utterly butcher what you're supposed to be working with. Right. And I think that's a great way of saying what's going on in Civil War.
Right. And so when I heard about Civil War, I was immediately turned off to it. And I just noped out entirely. I didn't read it for years and years later.
Oh.
And so part of the reason I noped out of it was that it was the pitch. I was like, this is the antithesis of the Marvel universe. Right. A superhero universe requires the assumption that individual citizens maintain the ability to enforce law. Right. It requires a situation where the citizens maintain the power that they also grant government, right? Vigilantism has to be a fact, an accepted fact, or nothing makes sense. in a superhero universe. So which is why all superhero stories are right wing. But
Not all, maybe most.
well, maybe the authority might not be,
I
because
think he's saying that tongue in cheek. But
the authority might not be,
I was
because
gonna
it's
say, I think
actually about a totalitarian government enacted on by force against people's will. So that's a different story. That's a leftist fantasy right there. But yeah, so that's the thing is, I just I knew this was going to be a massacre to the Marvel universe, so I didn't want any part of it. And for years I had people like, oh no, give it a shot, it's really good. Oh no, Mark Miller, whatever his name is, he puts together a good little story. No problem, Fizz. So but yeah, I never did it. But what happened was, we'll get to there's a scene at the end that somebody shared on Twitter like 3 years ago. Frank Castle did lots wrong, just not this. This whole thing. But Frank Castle's a whole different discussion. Good one though, good one.
But
anyway,
he is responsible for one of the dumbest moments in this entire thing.
yes. Well, Frank Castle is horribly misused in this whole thing. I mean, he's just
I would argue that he's probably the most written in character because it's like he's killing people he do.
Yeah, but I mean, like, that's the thing, the idea. I think we'll probably get to that in a second. But there's a scene at the end of the book where Captain America, I won't get too much in that right now, but some stuff Captain America says, somebody shared him on Twitter back in like 2018, maybe even 17, and I saw that and I was like, this is the weakest, saddest thing I've ever read. This is the death of Captain America. And the dude who shared it with me was like, how dare you say stuff like that? This is what nobility looks like. And I'm like, no, we'll get to that when we get to that, I'm sure. But,
okay.
yeah. I mean, just one of those things where there was no awareness.
So I'm okay. I'm okay with it,
especially if you guys like compare, like this is if you want to break your heart, read Marvels and then read this.
So I guess
Busiek gets it. I mean, he's a giant lefty and a totally rational person, but he gets the premises of the superhero universe.
So let me ask this question. So if possible, let's try to just for a second. Let's try to divorce all of Marvel from this story, because, like I said, I don't know if I would say it's a great story one way, even if it were the case. I wouldn't say it's a great story, but I think I would be able to accept the story a little bit more if this were a Millerverse story with entirely Millerverse characters.
Well,
I get that.
Yeah,
are you saying Frank Miller?
Right?
No.
Mark Miller.
No?
Mark Miller. Mark Miller has his own continuity of stuff,
like Kingsman and Kick-Ass and stuff like that.
Yeah. So if you take,
did he do Kiss Kiss
Oh,
Bang
I
Bang
see
with
what you're
CrossGen? I can't remember if that was his or not. But anyway, but which I can give it that, right? Because you know who else did that exact story? The Incredibles, right? It's exactly the same premise. Worked in there, everybody becomes government operatives and gets shut down because of the liability, because somebody gets saved who doesn't want to be saved, right?
True.
And so it's the exact same beats as far as it goes. It didn't go Civil War style where there's a big fight between heroes, but it's the same philosophies that fight in the background of the Incredibles, and it was good, especially the first one. Well, they only really made one Incredibles movie. So,
you didn't like the second one?
Oh, what's to like? It's just the first movie.
Yeah, it's not great.
It's exactly the same plot as the first movie, only
less
chromosomes.
good.
I didn't have a problem with it.
It's exactly the same with 2 X chromosomes. You just you swap the characters around, and
it was mostly
masculine motivations for feminine motivations, and it's exactly the same.
It was the exact same film, except it was less good. So it was just a letdown. It wasn't I wasn't offended so much. It was just like, this is the exact same film as the first one, except all of the things that it's copying are less good this time.
Well, and here's the thing: I don't think it would have been less good if we hadn't gotten the taste of the first one, right? just imagine, if you will, Incredibles 2, where there is no Mr. Incredible, right? He's just a dude, right? Or he's not superpowered, right? Right? Like he was an unknown street level guy before everything went down, and then like, so like if they're gonna break it open, if they're gonna have somebody be the hero, it's got to be the person with the public profile, and that was, you know, Elastigirl, right? I think it would be a solid, you know, Mr. Mom style action comedy, but because we wouldn't have had the flavor of the first one.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree. But
Well, I think there's another big problem too, is that they had a better story because they set up the whole Underminer thing, and there was a video game that actually showed you the rise of the Underminer, and it was way better. It was like, why didn't you just make that the movie?
Yeah, well, and
anyway, let's.
Because there was,
so you guys are noticing. You guys notice that we would rather talk about any other thing than Civil War.
You got us here,
including The Incredibles 2.
You made your bed, now sleep in it.
I've got another image to pull up. Let's bounce to the. So for those.
Let's. I want to lead into it.
Gotcha.
So first of all, like I said, so Marvel was nearly broken, and Spider-Man and the X-Men and Blade and the Ultimate Universe pulled his fat out of the fire, and then they nearly lost it again thanks to Bill Jamis. And so then Marvel brings in the Ultimate guys. They say, you know, hey, Miller, you've been, you know, and Warren Ellison and all those guys. You guys are gonna
Warren Ellis.
Ellis.
Yeah, it's Harlan Ellison. Yeah.
Harlan Ellison. Yeah. So they bring in these guys and say, we're gonna do what you did over with Stormwatch. Do it to the Marvel Universe.
Oh, I don't like Stormwatch.
Yeah, well, I know, but that's what they did. That's all they do. That's all they're capable of doing is that stuff. That's the stories they tell. They're so anyway, they bring them in. They say, make it happen. And so they did. That's what they did, and that's why all the characters. I think that's my theory about why all the characters are written out of character. They had this whole thing on there. So the story so far is that the stupid kids blow up a neighborhood because of their ineptitude, and that pisses me off because those guys are heroes.
Except they didn't, because it was actually the villain who did.
Yeah, right. That's what I'm saying. This is where you get tonal conflict, right? Because you have you have these essentially childish cartoon characters behaving like they live in a cartoon. How do I phrase this? Okay, this, like I said again, this is a tonal dissonance. Imagine the Looney Tunes, right? And they're hitting each other over the head with mallets because they live in a Looney Tunes universe. And you've been reading Looney Tunes for years, right? So suddenly Elmer Fudd pulls out his gun and he does the thing where he comically shoots one of the characters, except this time the guy's head explodes with blood and guts.
Right.
And then it's like, now we're holding a funeral for Daffy. That's what's happening in Civil War. You're taking a superhero universe that runs on superhero physics and superhero consequences in a superhero universe, and you're instantly injecting a Millerverse universe, because Millerverse runs a different way. It runs on a more brutal register, and that's fine if you want to read Kick-Ass. People love Kick-Ass. That's fine. I'm not judging that. I'm just saying what he did is
even look at like what Ennis did with Hitman, right? Like Hitman got one neighborhood in Gotham City, and they said, okay, here you go, Ennis. Make this as disgusting as you want it. And it's gory, hilarious, extra violent, hypersexualized comedy gold that has like this philosophical like big brain idea behind it, right? And I think like, but they make it work because they put really firm walls around it, right? And so even when he crosses over with the capes, it's still in a way that honors the cape tradition, while not diminishing this gritty crime fiction that he's telling, right? And I freaking love that series for that very reason. It could be done within the Ennis did that with his Punisher too, right? When he brought a lot of the same sensibilities to Hitman with slightly fewer jokes over.
So So Fischoso has a good counterpoint, and again, what I would answer to that. He says people have died within superhero comics before, so why is people dying in Civil War a big thing? So what I would add to that is to say again, it's the tone of it. Characters can die, so like when I said that, like we're living in the Looney Tunes universe is like a universe where people almost never die, except in very cartoonish ways. Because technically, I think some characters have died before. It's very silly,
like,
but
it's like the setup you gave with Daffy suddenly dead, right? Like you could have a hilarious short where everyone's having a funeral for Daffy,
right?
And then Daffy's like not actually dead, like he'd like faked it or so whatever.
There is a story where Yosemite Sam dies and goes to hell multiple times. And I remember this because it traumatized me as a kid. But the way they did it was still within what I call the register or the vocabulary of the Looney Tunes universe.
Right, it was slapstick.
You never saw Yosemite Sam getting his arms amputated and like blood spurting out. That's like Happy Tree Friends, right? So a superhero register or a superhero vocabulary runs in a particular way. Characters can die, but they don't die in the way that Mark Miller portrays them. We're like in a... Go ahead.
That comes back to one of those fundamental premises of superhero universe, right? I was talking about the intrinsic, libertarian aspect within the universe, where the just like you have the right to bear arms, you have the right to defend yourself and others by whatever means you have at your hand. That's an assumption of a superhero universe. So Batman is morally right to don the cape and cowl. Superman is morally right to stop the building from falling, right? And everyone within the universe who's not a villain, right, understands that that's the situation. That's the assumption of your average citizen on the street, is that these gods among us are still human, and if they fail, they're still trying to save us. And so that's there's an inborn grace and patience that is part that everybody just takes part of. And if you read even some of the background stories, like oh man, I can't remember the name of it right now. There was a construction was a company that went through and fixed the buildings in the Marvel universe.
Damage control.
Yeah. And that was the whole deal, was that the average Joe knew that this was, oh hey, the Atlanteans are invading, and if it's basically a natural disaster, we'll get over it. we'll survive. So but that's that fundamental philosophical undertone of a superhero universe that just is totally ignored in this story.
Right, that's what I was going to say. It's utter tonal dissonance.
And if I may add on, the fact that you've taken this universe. Now, I'm no fan of superheroes, by the way, or superhero universes myself. But if you look at the fact that they've taken the last 60 years of superhero comics and immediately started telling the fans, oh, by the way, superheroes are bad. All that stuff you've been reading for the last 60 years, yeah, it's no good. We're going to change it.
That's a good point, because ultimately what's being said here is that, all the superheroing that's been done for so long, it's problematic. And,
right.
And again, it's because they're reading a much more, it's not realism, but a type of realism.
Because they're Marxists.
That may be, but
it also, they try to work this into every Superman story now. The massive amount of casual, what's it called?
Right, and that was one of my big problems.
Yes, thank you. Sorry,
Superman. That was one of my big problems with Superman. The Man of Steel movie. At first I was wowed by it, but after kind of wore on me a little bit, I realized that the Superman that Zack Snyder gave us is the dumbest man on the face of the goddamn planet. And he's the one they want, that the Kryptonians want. He could lure them away from people, but instead he just fights them right next to the babies.
Rhys, we're doing that thing again where we talk about everything except for Civil War.
But we're making a comparison.
I know.
That's the thing, is it's the same thought process that goes into it. See,
So I would argue again that, or I would say that what's being done here a little bit is what Alan Moore kind of tries to do in, or what he does in Watchmen, because Watchmen was Alan Moore saying, "What if superheroes existed in the real world? What would the consequences of that be?" And Mark Miller's basically taking that. Now again, when Alan Moore did that idea, he was not allowed to use DC characters, and he had to come up with his own, which is why I think Watchmen still holds up today. Mark Miller was allowed the keys to the kingdom, and he was allowed to basically do a version of Watchmen in the mainstream Marvel continuity. And I think that's why I hate this book.
And he was invited. That goes back to what I was talking about a little bit ago. He was invited into the kingdom.
So it's not even really his fault.
Well, I mean, okay. Like,
it's a little his fault. But...
drunk driving is bad, but if you hand a drunk his keys, some of
Right.
it's on you, man.
Right, yeah. Okay, so for those of you, we haven't even really talked about the plot of the book. So let me do a very brief summary. I'll do a very brief summary, and then we can hit some of the major points. So the brief summary is that
everybody does terrible things.
After the inciting incident where people died, it creates this huge, like I said, which is tonally inconsistent with the Marvel Universe in the way it's portrayed. There's a huge debate about, we have all these unregistered superheroes around that could lead to all this collateral damage. We need to pass an act of Congress to legislate the vigilantes.
Okay.
Then after,
before we get to the act of Congress, I got to show this scene here. This is the last Captain America panel right here.
I'll pull it up. Which page is it?
It's just after the 2-page spread at the beginning of issue 1.
Issue 1. All right. Give me a second. I'll pull it up for you. So we can show
just
it on
after
screen.
the big explosion. It's like the 2 pages from that.
Alrighty. Is that when he's talking to Maria Hill?
No, it's when he's talking to Tony. Cap's talking to Tony. And you see that's there in my big.
Oh, yeah,
big
I got you.
marker.
I got it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let me briefly just hit the overall summary, and then we can jump on those points. So after the inciting incident, there's that legislation that comes up, and then the Marvel Universe essentially, or a lot of the heroes, split into 2 factions: the people who support the legislation to legislate superheroes and vigilantes, and the people who are against it. And the rest of the comic is about those 2 sides in conflict. Boom, there's your basic summary. But obviously, that's where the story is going to, come to pieces, because we're taking what I would say it could be an interesting idea or is an interesting idea, but the way it's realized in the Marvel Universe ends up taking all your favorite heroes and making them do sometimes stupid things, sometimes very evil things that are entirely out of character with what we've been establishing them to be, because these characters who used to operate in a superhero universe are suddenly operating in a very, very different kind of universe. And like I said, I think I got the image pulled up. And like I said, there's some very...
So here's Captain America. Kind of the first thing Captain America says, Tony says that the cops have got a lead on Nitro. And Cap says, "Does it even matter?" Right. So we're looking to bring the guy to justice who killed all these people. Does it even matter? Cap says. Does that sound like a guy who would call himself Captain America? Right? We're not going to hunt down the terrorists that killed all these kids. No, we're just going to let the public blame them on these other teenagers.
Well,
right?
To be fair, you got to read the rest of the context there. He's basically because he's Cap. He's not in tune with the whole like modern culture, and he's basically like, in comparison, look at this this reality TV show, and it's all for
but that's it. But that comes back to what I was talking about, like the intentional disregarding of the New Warriors' history to get this moment, and it disregards the fact that this Captain America, he's out of touch with the reality today. Sure, the dude was barking at trees to get himself to fight Nazis. Remember, that's the guy. He believes so much that we have to protect people. He put everything he had on the line, right? And that's what justice is going out for what is right. And to put that kind of hopelessness in Cap's mouth, that is a crime to comic books.
I am okay with the character acting out of character very briefly as like a moment of weakness, because it can be like, hey,
you gotta be fair. That can be some of the best writing you can do.
But I would say that very quickly, I would want to see that character be either confronted by someone who knows them better and say, hey, Cap, that doesn't sound like you. You're having maybe a dark moment. Or for Cap himself, maybe self-correct and say, you know what, I slipped up here, or like, I don't really believe that.
And also, don't do it right in the very beginning of the story before anything's actually happened. Maybe like take him through his character arc before you get there.
Yeah, but that's the thing, no character arcs. Well, maybe one. There may be one character arc.
Mr. Fantastic has
one.
Mr. Fantastic supposedly has one.
Okay,
Yeah,
here's the one good thing I'm gonna say about this story is actually Sue's character arc. I really did appreciate seeing her start out on one side and then slowly start seeing what was going on. And by the time we get to the end of the battle with Thor, she is like, okay, that's it. You've just gone too far. I actually have here in my hand and this is one of the problems I have, of course, with both Marvel, DC, and in general now. Every time we have one of these big crossover events, you have to have 18 different tie-ins to understand.
Oh gosh, yeah.
But I have a Fantastic Four issue that was tied into Civil War, and it's all about the actual conversations happening between her and Reed the whole time, and how she finally snaps and goes off on him and leaves. And then Grimm comes in and he explains how he's given up on the whole thing and he doesn't care which side is right and he wants to expatriate. And which also, by the way, explains him coming at the end randomly and why she's shocked to see him. If you didn't know that, you'd just be like, why is she shocked that he's helping people? So yeah, I actually appreciate kind of like she's the one character I think brings some actual emotion that makes sense, at least, to the whole thing. But
I will say that one of the problems, though, is the fact that, again, to have an interesting story, we have to sacrifice so much of what these. So in that case, right? So
like I said, it's the one thing I like.
Right, but in order to get that moment, we have to sacrifice one of the most important and stable relationships of the Marvel universe, which is Reed and Sue's marriage. And it's like,
is
great.
it? I will admit I am no expert at all in Fantastic Four.
So
I wouldn't be
the
able
616 Marvel universe started with Fantastic Four. That was the very first Marvel canon book.
And Sue and Reed being married.
The Captain America was added retroactively after the universe was already established.
Sue and Reed are essentially the nuclear family of the Marvel mainstream comics,
literally and figuratively. Hello, right, Larry.
Exactly.
Hey. Wow, we're talking about one of the things I hate most in the universe of Marvel Comics, which is Civil War.
Yep.
We're all in the same club.
Or, hey, let's take the story of 9/11, but let's make it about superheroes and make our version of George W. Bush Tony Stark and make him be right.
Yeah.
What?
And also let's make sure that it's so very much like all of the debate around gun registration. About national gun registries. Let's put all of the spicy tomatoes into one basket and then put spandex on them.
All right,
what's that? What's that? Reed Richards says that he's for it now, even though he spent several comics being against it because it was the Mutant Registration Act before against his son. No, that's fine. That's fine. We're just going to ignore that by saying Reed was totally okay from the lesson that his uncle, who got punished by the Red Scare and killed himself, he was wrong for opposing the government. That's totally Reed Richards' thing.
Again, one of the things that makes so much more sense in this tie-in comic is how they basically portray him as terrified of being on the losing side because he's basically trying to protect his family. He wasn't, in other words, he wasn't ever actually for anything he was doing. He was just cowering out, which I suppose you may hate that they did that to Reed Richards.
I'm okay with Reed being on the wrong side. I am not okay with him building a murder cyborg and not nearly being called out enough on it because the whole point of the Fantastic Four is fighting, I don't know, a guy who makes murder cyborgs for all the time.
I mean, also Reed made interdimensional gulag.
Well, let's not
forget that point.
There's a reason I don't love Reed Richards, and that's usually how it cut. Why? Because it's like out of nowhere. It's, oh, by the way, I just invented this thing that's going to save us.
Okay, so Drawn Talk has a really good point. And I have not read all the tie-ins. I wanted to have some time to do that, but I haven't had the chance yet.
Well,
he says Civil War would be better if all the tie-ins were barred of the main Civil War line. Therefore, we could see the entire scope. And he was not aware of the Sue stuff. I would say that I think that in the tie-in books, you do end up getting more of the conversation about the debate that we need for the main book. The main book ends up just being kind of like the main cinematic beats.
Right. And it depends on the book, because like there was a Young Avengers Runaways crossover tie-in that had really nothing to do with the book at all. It was just set at the same time. So like some of the individual, and I enjoyed it. I liked both of those series at the time. I mean, I still like them, but I mean, I was collecting them at the time, is what I'm trying to say. So it was cool, but it was one of those things where those things that are just tangentially or that connected to it, those wouldn't have necessarily fit in the same way, where some of the other stories like needed to be part of that.
Yeah, like my favorite part of the whole event actually has almost nothing to do with the event whatsoever. It's the Miss Marvel Civil War tie-in. There's like 6 or 7 issues of it. I've got like a couple of them, and it's just her and Wonder Man running around fighting like underground organizations. Like it's been a while since I read it. I could probably pull it out, but it's like they're fighting either Hydra or Hammer or something like that, and they're just doing things in underground labs together as an excuse for why these two powerful characters aren't actively involved in the superhero fight. That if you put them on either side, it could easily turn the tables, because a lot of the thing only works because all the most powerful people are out of the picture.
Well, except for the very end where the Sentry is on one of the sides and they never even show him fighting.
Did either? Yeah, for sure. Did any of you guys read Civil War 2?
No.
Oh God, I read a little bit.
You mean where we have Kamala Khan be part of Carol Danvers' Hitler Youth?
I did hear about that.
But no, it was just because I didn't read the Miss Marvel tie-in.
I didn't realize that was Civil War 2.
Yeah, that's the funny thing is like so she was Carol's intentionally not involved in Civil War 1 because of whatever reasons, but then she's like the raison d'etre for Civil War 2. It's like, well, that seems like messed up.
To be fair, around 2011, there was an entire little event, which was like X-Men versus the Avengers, where they just flipped a switch and completely changed who Carol Danvers was as a character.
So yeah, Avengers versus X-Men.
Is that when it happened?
That's one of the first comics I actually collected.
Well, that's one of the things that like, and like similar things had happened just before Civil War 2. One of the reasons the X-Men aren't involved is they just had like House of M, and like they were like, we're not involved because we put ourselves together.
The X-Men had just gone through their own thing that ruined them forever.
Yeah, destroyed. Yeah.
So they wanted something to distract from that.
I think there's lots of reasons. Well, I mean, there were still
and also, let's not forget this set up for one more day, which ruined Spider-Man forever.
Oh no!
Oh yeah.
Which we'll get to.
I was just about to pull that image out.
That's one of those big moments. So as it goes along, people start like siding up because there's 2 fights, and they're like, "Oh, pro-registration, anti-registration, yeah," and then Peter, for some reason, and this is the thing, that Peter Parker has spent, like, I don't know if you guys read like the old Spider, like when I first got into Spider-Man.
Trust me, we all know what you're gonna say.
Yeah. When I got into Spider-Man as a young boy, I wasn't young. I was in my middle teens before I actually dipped my toe to Spider-Man, because I was such a big fan of Batman and that whole thing that it took me a while to even look at Marvel comics, right? So I started looking at Marvel comics, and about that time, this would be 93, 94. Marvel started releasing the Spider-Man saga, which was a prose style history retelling of every Spider-Man story in the continuity, right? Of all of the, not every story, but all the beats, right? All the main stuff. So it had a little bit of comics, a little bit of prose, and I was reading through it. So like I had ingested like the entire like history of Spider-Man before the Ultimate Spider-Man came out, and that's why I was so underimpressed, because it's the same damn story. But like Spider-Man's whole thing is growing from a boy to a man and becoming an independent person and standing on his own feet and dealing with life's knocks and all that kind of stuff. And Peter is not a joiner. Like that's the one thing. Every group he's tried to join with, he's been like, I don't think I ought to be part of this. It doesn't fit. Whether it was the Avengers, whether it was whatever. Before Civil War, every time he'd had a chance to meet up with somebody, it was a no, right? So then,
or it just doesn't work out for. It's not. Yeah.
I mean, or he'll like, he'll do a thing with like, he was buddies with Johnny Storm, so he'd be in the Fantastic Four for a couple of issues or whatever. But it was one of those things that just moved along, right? Just moved along for him.
Yeah, Spider-Man's real life always gets in the way of him really joining anything.
Well, and his priorities, because his priorities are being a man, right? I mean, and the struggle that it takes, the uphill climb. He was living out a Jordan Peterson book, right? Like accepting life's struggles, accepting the responsibility, making his bed,
saving lobsters.
All that kind of saving the lobsters. Slaying the girl, all that kind of stuff, right? So,
how many people are gonna know what you mean when you say slaying the girl?
Oh gosh,
I'm mixing my metaphors to be
funny. Look. Peter slayed a lot of girls. Okay,
he did.
Yes, that's
dear.
Moving on.
I've got it pulled up, by the way.
Yeah, I know. So Peter Parker sides with Iron Man and goes pro registration, and to do this, he reveals the secret of being to the world. He unmasks before the world on purpose, right? The secret he's been keeping to keep his family safe.
I have to ask a question before we go any further. So I'm assuming that, like a lot of things in this storyline, the main book that ties in here probably had Spider-Man having a very important conversation we do not see.
Wow, this is exactly what I was just waiting for about 5 minutes trying to find the opportunity to talk about that. Yes. Okay. I can only assume there must be another one of these tie-ins, because 5 seconds ago, we saw him arguing against this very thing with everybody at that party.
Right. So, like, did anyone read that Spider-Man story?
I have not. I am putting 2 and 2 together and assuming it must exist, because the flip here is like, huh?
Well, and I remember hearing something about there being a debate, and he got like MJ's blessing to do whatever he felt was the right thing.
It's okay, Peter. Let Aunt May die. Zack Snyder's Spider-Man.
Yeah. Gosh. It's so true.
And this is the problem. I'm going to put my own thing up here. With these stupid tie-ins here, although perhaps I'm jumping ahead. Can you guys see this?
Yeah.
All right, look at this line. Now, this is after the whole Thor fiasco, right? Thor comes in. He starts killing people.
Just straight up killing people.
And then it is like another issue and 30 pages before they actually drop on us. Oh, by the way, Thor actually is dead, and this is a robotic clone we made of him. Sorry we left that part out, right? So is there another tie-in issue? If not, this is how they decide to give it to us. Oh, by the way, isn't it convenient that he happens to collect one of his hairs? I can't believe we cloned Thor.
Marvel usually relies on you being up to date with its continuity. I'm assuming that at this point, Thor being like out of action was known, and it was more of a surprise that he showed back up.
Exactly. There was this was after the second time they did Ragnarok.
But that just makes it worse, because you'd be like, what the heck? How is he back? And then they take this long to say, simply to have one character say, well, isn't that convenient that we made a robot Thor?
So I have to say that scene, or them making Thor what they made him, is what allows them to do a very, very, what I would call a Mark Miller panel later on. Because because like I said, I was mentioned before, Mark Millar is I think I'm pretty safe in saying this. He's known for being a bit of an edgelord, and he loves to have scenes of very dramatic and extreme hyperbolic violence, which is harder to get away with in the Marvel universe. Although, like I said, he's been really pushing that envelope. But in the final issue, Hercules, which is I was kind of nice to see Hercules get some love, because I feel like he gets wharfed a bunch.
Mhm.
I always forget he exists.
Right. But
he was involved in another storyline going on around the same time with the whole Planet Hulk thing.
But so this is so I got a panel here, and this is a Mark Millar panel. And
before we get into that,
right,
I want to step back. First of all, I want to point out, here's that party that I'm going to give myself the screen here. Here is the party that Cartoonisticus is talking about right there, and it includes Tony Stark, who's a self-made man, right? Who has taken it upon himself to patrol his own technology more than once, as people have stolen it from him. The whole Iron Wars thing,
including the government who stole it from him. Let's not forget that one.
Yeah, it was several governments, wasn't it? But,
which, by the way, is the one thing that they did not leave out of the movie. That same irony here still exists there. If you see how those first 3 movies went with him versus the military, him versus the government, and then he's the one being
and then
the
he just
flagship.
flipped the switch. Well, and in the cinematic universe, it kind of makes sense because it's all his fault, right? Everything bad that's happened in the Marvel universe, except the original, within the Avengers side of it, except for the original invasion, everything else is his fault because of his ego.
Ultron and yeah.
So, but that didn't happen in here. In here, he's just doing the white savior thing. And he's just, since he's the rich guy, he's just assuming responsibility for all these other people because he was one of the first heroes. And so they're saying, somebody's saying, oh, well, we're having some problems. Maybe it's dangerous to do this registration thing. It could delegitimize us. And Tony's response, or make us more legitimate. Why shouldn't we be better trained and publicly accountable? Right? But everything that Tony has done for 50 years before this.
So to be fair to Tony in this story, because like I said, a lot of characters get written out of character, and I would say that Tony's being emotionally led, almost on a leash, by the mother of someone who died in the very, very awful scene that starts this off. Yeah. Right. And so she's basically just...
Again, same thing happens in the movie.
She's wagging her dead son in front of his face, the whole series. And so most of his decisions are basically motivated by his personal guilt that he feels, whether it's deserved or not, but because of that one woman who's like, my son died. So to be fair to the story, at least there's this impetus you can see and go, okay, well, at least he has a reason, an emotional reason for why he is doing what he is doing.
Right. The thing is that her son was killed because a supervillain killed him. That had nothing to do with Tony.
Right.
It's like the villains are going to be there because the villains are going to be there no matter what. There's going to keep being villains. They're not going to go away just because the heroes are shackling themselves.
Did Tony form the Illuminati before this event started?
It was immediately after this.
Yeah. Because if it was before that, yeah, because if it was before this, it would make me feel like this was.
Yeah, no, because the Illuminati sent Hulk to space.
Yeah, so that was before this. So I mean, the way I always, in my personal headcanon, make sense of this story is, so this was a Reichstag incident caused by the Illuminati. And Tony said, listen, Charles, I need you to make a giant incident happen with some people getting killed so we can get the government to register superheroes.
Your Tony's way more evil than my Tony.
Well,
hey,
actually,
Matt, can we
here's the
get
thing
away
is Tony, off of the cuffs of this, have become pretty evil. So this is a problem where this is out of character for him, kind of. right? If we include the Illuminati stuff slightly before this, it falls into his character a little bit more. But like historically, this is out of character. But this becomes his character because if you read like every Iron Man story after this point, he's doing like planned society, just evil shit, but still being put as like the good guy.
I mean, like Superior Iron Man, for example. That was super evil.
So
Well, he had a reason for being evil. A magic spell made him do it.
so moving on. Right?
This is why I don't like superhero universes.
Oh no, I love superhero universes.
That's
but-
a whole different conversation. That's a whole different conversation. We're just gonna presume the validity of the superhero universe for the rest of this conversation, and we're gonna go ahead and we'll talk about the nature of superhero universes in February.
Well, okay, but here's the thing: even with this lady affecting him, and this is the problem I had, even with in the movie as well, is that if he is personally feeling bad about something that he thinks is his fault, he should easily be able to keep himself on a leash. He doesn't need to go to lengths to get someone else to keep him on a leash, right?
So the idea is the fact that because this woman's son died, she's able to push a point on him. I don't know if he doesn't really, because in the comic he doesn't feel personal guilt. He never has a moment of like, oh, I did this, but he definitely feels like something needs to change.
He collectivizes it. He said, "We did this," like a little socialist he is at this point. He's just
Which is why he gets into planned society stuff.
It's exactly. And hey Rhys, not everything's about politics. Yeah, it is.
I just always thought his motivations were weird because it seems like they're not actually. He doesn't have that power to change what he feels is the problem.
Yeah. Well, so I've actually brought this up before,
after
right?
Though.
On Rhys's channel, we've had this discussion like a long time back. I don't remember who else was in it. Maybe even Twitless, you might have been. But we were talking about how like the British invasion of authors and stuff, and how they kind of just don't quite get the superhero comic on average. There's a couple that kind of do, but for the most part, they didn't. And I think one way you can break this down is I see the two different like hero stories between like Europe and America to basically be a breakdown between the knight, like the appointed hero, versus the lone gunman in the West, right? Which is the vigilante hero. And this story is really kind of the knight versus the gunman.
Well, I mean that's the conflict in a lot of like Japanese samurai stories too. The samurai or the ronin, right?
Right.
Which where's the master sitting there? And I mean in Europe there was the knight errant. Was the same thing. The wandering knight wasn't connected to a particular feudal lord.
Those were the freelance
those became the bandit stories, right? It became the Robin Hood, and then the I can't remember the guy's name right now, but yeah, the highwayman, the noble highwayman stories that propped up.
So in that case, in what universe does it make sense that in DC the lone gunman is the Dark Knight?
Well, it's because. And the thing that's different about the Batman character specifically is that that's actually like because Batman is the king of Gotham, right? He's the nobleman that is protecting his realms.
So have you guys?
So he's speaking to an older order by taking the authority back to himself because his family's effort, their money built the town, provided a haven for people. So he's assuming that as exactly. He's assuming that as the noble. So yeah. But I mean it's still operating within the context that the individual people have the right to enforce the law, that kind of premise, but it speaks to the mythic point about the king protecting the realm.
So have you guys heard of the American monomyth theory?
I don't think so.
Lay it on me.
It was 1977. It was outlined by Robert Jewett and John Shelton Lawrence. And the thesis of the theory is a community in harmonious paradise is threatened by evil. Normal institutions fail to contend with this threat. A selfless superhero emerges to renounce temptation. And superhero, and this is not like comic book superheroes, it's basically any heroic American figure. To renounce temptation, carry out the redemptive task, aided by fate. His decisive victory restores the community to its paradisical condition, the superhero then recedes into relative obscurity. The Cincinnatus archetype, basically.
So, like you said, Robin Hood.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, it's it's every Clint Eastwood picture.
Yeah.
It's
American
American.
name.
The book, The American Monomyth, actually uses the Clint Eastwood movies as an example.
Even Dirty Harry, right? Dirty Harry is a government operative, but he's working outside of the confines of government operative to perform the mission that the government is unwilling to perform for themselves. And so yeah,
that brings us around to the Avengers.
Right. Which is the whole idea of the name of the Avengers, by the way, people. They're there to right the wrongs. That's the whole point of the name.
Well, let me. I want to show this panel off because again, this is a very Mark Miller story, and it has some very Mark Miller moments. And like I said, Mark Miller is very much known for his extreme hyperbolic violence, and so the idea of having a story this dark.
We got off on the thing here, but I want to set up. So there's it's still just me on the screen. I just realized it's been me this whole time. So we're sitting here, and there's this giant fight, and Spider-Man and Captain America fighting this whole kind of thing, and then who should show up but Thor? Which, look at this. Okay, I'm going to say one thing about this book that is excellent.
McNiven's art.
Yeah. look at that. Just my God.
Yeah,
it's such a shame that such glorious art's wasted on such a crap story.
McNiven's on is it New Avengers he did as well? Yeah, he there's some really great artwork in those. That
Can I ask something?
Yes.
Did McNiven's the only one who worked on this story?
I think on the 7 issues.
On the main book, yeah, I believe. Because
there were definitely moments I found myself asking, did Greg Land work on this thing?
No, not that I'm aware of, no.
Because some of this stuff is really weird. I'm just going to say. I have about 4 or 5 different pages I can show where the art is just making me go, huh?
Well, this was like I said, this was I think at the heyday of of Mike Deodato Jr. and McNiven's, like this kind of like quasi with Brian Hitch, where you were kind of having this quasi, cinematic drifting into a kind of verisimilitude with how you portrayed these characters.
Right. Yeah. So,
specifically for this event, they were trying to make a lot of the tie-in books and stuff, even with different artists, look as cohesive as possible. So they did try to ape each other's art and stuff here and there.
So why is Thor throwing his hammer in one direction and everybody appears to be falling in the other direction?
Oh, that's in this one here?
Yeah.
Let's look at it here.
See this? Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was up.
No, you weren't up yet. Well, I think it's knocking everyone over. I think is the thing they're trying to get at.
In which direction? Where is the impact coming from?
From the hammer.
Just the force, sonic boom.
Exactly. Yeah. So why are they being sucked toward the hammer?
Because
you see, in the old days, this would be a good thing for you to get a no prize for if you wrote Stan a good explanation to make this picture make sense.
Okay.
I've got more here.
Okay. So before we get into
I have a picture I've been trying to share for like 20
minutes. So I'm leading into it. So Thor shows up and there's a big fight. And here's Giant Man, the second Giant Man, which if you guys don't
Goliath, right?
Yeah, Goliath. That's right. He changed his name to Goliath later on. But so Ant-Man, and then there was a second Ant-Man, and then there was Giant Man who became Goliath, and they've all got the Pym particles and get really big, and Goliath was a lab assistant.
Let me pull that image up. It's a good one.
Yeah, it's
I like Goliath.
He was great. He was really, really good until look at this, just got the hammer thrown clean through his torso, and they killed him.
And now we get to
this is
You. By the way, it's funny because like we talk about current year politics. You could not make this comic today when the character whose shutdown code is Richard Wagner, Mr. Norse God himself kills a black man
in a story called Civil War.
Yeah, I know. It's just
before they then bury him wrapped in chains.
The layers of no, you couldn't do this.
Well, I mean, and that's the trying to be anyway.
Seriously, you might have to ask, what the heck were you thinking?
And this was the most senseless thing in the book. It was just this.
There's also a trend. There is a trend of like Marvel killing its giant characters because Stature gets killed later on by Doctor Doom in it's almost a similar moment.
That's probably just one of those bigger they are, the harder they fall.
I think but it's like a theme for Marvel. They love like downright killing these tall.
I think it's the angle. It's the angle. That's what they just want it for the shot.
Okay.
I mean, is it, or are there a lot of people under 5'6" working for Marvel right now?
I think what you find a lot in storytelling is that it gets really easy to take your biggest, strongest, most toughest character, and if you can have someone lay them out flat, then that someone now seems really powerful and really threatening.
I mean, sure. It's a pattern I know. I read an Image comic that did the same thing. They killed the giant. It's like, man, they really love killing these big characters. If the worst power to have in any of these superhero universes is growing powers, because you're just a big target and you're gonna die.
But I think it's tied into it. Like, I can't think of many people who have had their butts kicked more than the Hulk, Wolverine, and Superman. Right?
Nah.
Well, they didn't have a hammer thrown through their torso, so they've got that going for them.
Batman gets his butt kicked way more often than you would think.
Yeah. But anyway,
at least the good ones.
So I'm wanting to.
Batman usually powers through though.
Doesn't know he gets clowned a bunch.
According to Tom King, he powers through because of the power of his love for his mommy.
Oh, geez, thanks. Okay, so finally we get the scene. Yeah, all right. So Hercules, it was kind of cool to see Hercules get a moment, but aside from that, them making Thor a kind of quasi cyborg clone is what allows them to have the most Mark Miller scene that ever Mark Millered. Which is
the thing, and this is the thing that doesn't make any sense to the scene at all, right? That just bothers me to no end. Like, so they used a combination of cybernetics and genetic molding to make this robot, and they said
clone is specifically
to make this clone, but they needed to have his DNA so that he can wield the hammer, because it's the real Mjolnir, right? But that's not how Mjolnir works.
This is Robo Mjolnir. Look, the Mjolnir's breaking. It's a machine,
and Hercules is the one wielding it. I was so weirded out by that until this panel happened. I was like, oh,
it's a robot Mjolnir. Because it's breaking in pieces, you can see there. But Mark Miller loves having heads explode. So
I see.
So he earlier on, Punisher gets to blow up a couple of people's heads, which again feels very out of place for a Marvel book. Again, Marvel characters die. Punisher kills people, but like I think it's Punisher Max, which is again a separate, I believe, out of continuity series where he gets to do some of the super violence.
It's quasi continuity, but
it
was like Vertigo to DC, where like something like a lot of the elements were canon, but they didn't get brought up in the way they got brought up later on.
I think it depends on which Punisher, because there is a Punisher Max series that's completely uncanonical. Like he fights
the Avenger.
He fights Elektra. He kills the Kingpin or something. Like there's somewhere he's way off continuity.
And he's got guns that like shoot the souls of victims and something like that.
Well, no, that one was continuity until Marvel became embarrassed by everybody hating it.
Yeah.
I wish
that's what I'm saying.
I wish they would get embarrassed by this and make it not continuity.
Any chance of that happening died when they made a movie with the same name.
Yeah.
So my many problems with this start off with, so you can clone a god. So that means you have the ability to genetically engineer people with Asgardian physiques.
Why do you need the robot?
Right.
Yeah.
No, I'll tell you why. It's so that you can have his head explode. Because no, that's the reason. Okay,
You're right.
It's 100% the reason. Mark Miller wanted a head explosion, and the only way they were going to get that into a Marvel book was to have it be a robot. Like if he wasn't a robot,
Is it also because they wanted Hercules to be able to wield the hammer?
No, it's Mark Miller wanting a head explosion. Mark Miller likes head explosions. If you read like Kick-Ass and you read other stories, he loves having like really just gruesome brutality, including
because you could make arguments that Hercules would be able to wield the hammer in certain conditions depending on the world. So that's like no problem, like whatsoever. They're basically the same character,
because it's about the worthiness and like Hercules.
I know, but it seems like everybody becomes worthy as soon as you want them to.
Well, that's how stories work.
Would even without
I'm going to pull the
like
I'm going to pull the curtain back on writing. That's exactly how it works.
Rhys giving throwing a bone to Marvel.
It was something special.
I think okay, like here's the thing. Like there's a way of describing whether or not a character is worthy or not, right? So when they wanted to make Jane Foster Thor, right? Which my God, that's the dumbest thing ever. Okay, so pay attention. The woman stops being frail when she grabs a hold of the man's hammer. What the hell are you doing, Jason Aaron?
Well, I mean,
anyway,
there's also
to be fair, it wasn't a very big. It's not a very long
table and walk away.
Okay, Logan.
It's a very short hammer. You'll notice it's got a very, very narrow hilt.
So anyway, moving on. So the thing about it is that
tall.
Oh my goodness!
I'm gonna kick you out of this.
You can't.
So,
I'll find a way.
The thing is like so with the problem. One of the big problems I had with the way that was done was that they wanted Jane to have this story, so they just said that Thor was unworthy. But nothing in his character changed across the nature of the story. He was the same guy before the story started with the God Killer story as he was after that. So to say that he suddenly had become unworthy, that was a nonsense. That was just that Jason Aaron just said it so that they'd have an excuse to give it to Jane, right? Rather than showing a story where Jane has some great moral character, some great amount of self-sacrifice, some idea of all that kind of stuff. And then like they did when doing the thing they did when Thunderstrike took over the Thor hero role for a while because Thor was busy being Odin because Odin had passed away in the 80s.
Right.
That was the whole and then that led into Beta Ray Bill and that whole thing because Odin was ruling Asgard. I mean, Thor was ruling Asgard, so he had to have a champion to keep Earth safe. And so first Eric Masterson, then Beta Ray Bill, and right. So there's ways of other. I mean, anyone can be worthy if you give them the right story behind it.
Here's the thing. You find some reason to say that, to pass the mantle on to Jane and literally make her the new Thor, who is, specifically chosen by the hammer, etc., etc. And that is Thor's thing, is I alone am worthy of the hammer. There's something very special about Captain America being this person who was so good that in certain very specific circumstances, he was actually able to do what only Thor can do.
Yep.
Once you move beyond that and you say, oh, this guy's a good person and this person's a good person, this guy's a really nice person, and anyway, here's Betty White over here, and Spider-Man could probably, and then half the universe can do what only Thor is supposed to do.
Okay, and that's fair, but Hercules is different in this regard because Hercules is even more like Thor than Cap is, even in those moments where he actually finds the heat of battle, the warrior spirit. They're basically the same character from different pantheons.
That's true. That's true.
He is probably.
Wouldn't that make it even worse though? Because Odin would be like, "You're my arch nemesis. There's no way you're going to be able to flip the hammer."
Well, the thing is, the spell's on the hammer, regardless of what Odin has to say about it. That's part of the thing about it too. The other part of it is that, like, and this is I'm going to go back. I'm going to go old school. The original iteration of Thor, right? So Thor, because of his braggadociousness, because of his carelessness, he was sent to Earth to be Donald Blake, right? And Donald Blake had a limp. He was infirmed. He was a doctor. He had a mind, but he was physically infirmed. And he discovers that he can turn himself into Thor when he finds the hammer, all that kind of stuff. But he can't be Thor all the time. He has to go back to being Donald Blake.
Yeah.
And when he goes back to being Donald Blake, Mjolnir transforms into Donald Blake's cane, his walking stick.
Right.
That gives him the ability.
That's a very important point, because
and
Marvel's Thor was a superhero interpretation of a Norse myth, in the sense that it wasn't just Thor plopped Control C, Control V into Marvel. It was, he's got a secret identity. He's got a civilian identity. He transforms into Thor. It is basically like either it's all those Marvel superheroes like Spider-Man, Hulk, what have you. It's just Thor as that. After a certain point, Marvel decided they no longer wanted that identity for the character, and they leave a Blake behind, and he just becomes regular Control C, Control V, Norse god into Marvel, which is what what he is in the MCU.
Yeah, there's a lot of differences from the.
There are a lot of differences, but I mean, but one of the things with that is that, like, the nature of this hero idea of Thor is that his weakness is his strength, right? That because the walking cane is the hammer, right? His weakness is his strength.
That's a good point.
And so it's about humility, right? Thor can be the hero to save the day, and his worthiness is tied to his ability to understand humility, and that's the whole aspect in that.
Also, if I remember, in like one of the first Avengers battles, there was a scene where he had to expose his secret identity to the other Avengers to like help somebody who had gotten injured, and that was one of the things that helped bring the Avengers closer together, like way back in the day.
Oh yeah. I did not read it, but I remember hearing.
It's just interesting that, like, I mean, despite like the actual lore differences from the myth, the original interpretation of this character followed a superhero, pattern. Whereas later on, they decided to ditch that and just go with the mythos side of it. Well, I want to transition a little bit into another reason why I again don't like this story, is that, and why it doesn't fit a superhero universe at all. Is how it ends. In many superhero stories, even ones that have some complexity to them, you have a good versus evil storyline, or maybe.
Before we get to this scene, I want to go back a few pages. Because
give me a second, I can pull it up.
Yeah.
That's fine. Which page do you want to go to?
So, let me find it here.
There is a funny scene where I do have to say one very good moment is where Tony Stark is made director of S.H.I.E.L.D. and he orders coffee from Maria Hill. I did like that because Maria Hill she just needs to be put into her place sometimes. And there's this perfect shot of just, he's like, he's basically doing the stereotypical, give me the sugar in my coffee. And she just gives him this look. And it's a good moment.
Hey, speaking of funny moments, does anyone have a clue what happened to Jameson in that shot? Did he faint? Did he run away? Did he explode?
He fainted. He fell down.
That was just so poorly drawn, I guess.
Also, did anybody, when they wrote that, think, hey, should we have a problem with a leading military contractor in the Marvel Universe becoming the head of a paramilitary police organization?
Well, no,
it's fine. It's fine. He's Tony.
I mean, he's already been selling them everything anyway.
He has like dinner with the president like every night after they play golf, because he's Tony Stark.
So here's the scene. It starts off with Cap and Iron Man are personally fighting with each other, and it's on. I don't know the pages. It's just a couple of pages after the Thor's death there.
Right. Yeah. Which
and after.
Just like which image you might pull up?
Oh, it's the first fight.
Let me show you. Now I'm fighting dirty is where we start.
Okay.
Right.
So
remember that.
Right. And so next couple pages over from there, there's the Thou Art No Thor. Okay, it's actually the page right after that one. Right. So Cap has gotten the better of Tony in the fight.
Yeah.
And he's just pounding him with the shield.
Yeah.
Right. While he's looking for that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
I got it.
Oh, you got it. You got it. Okay. Right. He's just pounding with the shield. He's just tearing his face up. Right. And then here's the thing.
They did pay homage to in the movie.
The next page. You look right there. See, this is one of those circles in my book because Captain America, having no awareness of what's going on, he's just totally captured in the moment. And then all of these other guys, right? They come
out of nowhere
and rescue him, right? They pull him off, right? And then they pull him off in the whole thing. And then here's the ticket. They see the next page. There's all of this chaos, all these busted buildings, and Cap says, "Oh my God, what's wrong?" Sam asks. "They were right. We're not fighting for the people anymore, Falcon. Look at us. We're just fighting." And Spider-Man, who's changed sides again, he's got rid of his Iron Spider armor, which was stupid anyway, says, "We were beating the man. We were winning back there." And Captain America says everything but the argument, right? Because Cap says Tony is right.
No, I don't. I know that he does. He's not saying
they're
that.
not arresting Captain America. They're arresting Steve Rogers, and that's a very different thing. And
he's not saying Tony's right. That
right.
I disagree with that.
Here, I absolutely think he's saying Tony's right. But here's the ticket, right? This is not Captain America anymore. Captain America wouldn't have partaken in this thing, and then been like, "Well, I guess I was wrong, guys." Cap is a strategist. He's a guy. He's not just an action hero. He's a guy of the mind and a guy of the heart. And if he wouldn't have done it if he didn't believe it needed done. Cap counts the cost of everything he does. Mm-hmm. That's the thing. So you don't have Captain America here in this thing, and that was the thing. Those were the panels that I read. And they were like that fellow shared on the Twitter at the beginning. And I was like, this is the saddest, weakest thing I've ever seen. And I was like, how can you say that? He's saying da da da. And I was like, no, you've got a Captain America who's a moron, who went off half cocked and didn't think things through ahead of time. That's not Captain America.
That is where this whole thing is so much more convoluted than both sides are right and both sides are wrong. The entire time, everything we see Tony's side do is not only borderline evil, but is constantly being referred to by the other side. Oh my gosh, can you believe the things they're doing?
Sue Stern comes out and says this is fascism.
Right, exactly. The whole Sue storyline. It's like they are clearly portraying them as the bad guys. And then at the absolute last possible second, we're just going to have, oh crap, a few buildings blew up.
No. Okay, so I'm going to defend the scene a little. I agree, Rhys, that Cap is, and there's several examples that support what you said in the fact that he is going off half-cocked here. Which again, I guess if someone were to, if they actually admitted that was going on in the story, I'd be okay with it, because then they'd be highlighting, hey, Cap, you're going off half-cocked. What's going on? Because he does react very differently, again, from the Cap we do know and love. In this scene, though, I think I have some mixed feelings towards it, but because I don't think I like the fact that he surrenders. I do think that there is a reason for him to have that kind of tear in his eye and to stop fighting. And part of it is the fact that he's Captain America. He's supposed to be fighting for the people. And one thing that they've been in this story, again, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but in the story they have established that they say the government's with us. We have, what they say, like 90% public support for the legislation. So when these civilians, because these are like, firemen and EMTs and stuff, and
they're first responders,
right? And they're pulling Cap off, and Cap realizes that he's basically fighting the very people he's supposed to protect, and that basically kind of breaks him. He kind of just like breaks. And that's why he's crying. And I'm like, you know what? If Captain America got attacked by civilians, that would be maybe the one thing that would mess him up. And so him having this kind of breakdown, I get, because he's not being attacked anymore by even Tony Stark or the people on the other side. He's being attacked by the people who normally stand up for him.
Right, but that goes into the whole story, right? There's an extra constitutional interdimensional gulag that they've just liberated
Right.
from
Out of nowhere. They tell us,
absolutely
these guys are
anti-constitutional law that got put into place, right?
So
like this is
I think this
like
scene,
everything about the premise of the story is contrary to.
I think this scene can work with a little bit of redrafting.
But
Him having the moment where he's just like
right.
he has like a moment of cognitive dissonance.
In order to have this moment, you have to preface the idea that Cap is morally wrong. And
right, and that's what I'm saying.
No, I don't think so.
Like, even if the scene
well,
works,
I kind of agree
idea
with
that
Twitless here, right?
Okay.
And I don't think he's even saying that he's philosophically or that his side is morally wrong. I think he's saying he's doing moral wrong. And there's a difference there. It's the idea of not that I'm wrong, I just lost the debate.
But don't forget that.
See, I don't think he lost the debate. I think he found himself in a impossible position, and in order for him to press onwards, he's going to have to basically start fighting against what he actually stands for. Because if he keeps fighting, he's going to have to hit one of those EMTs, and it's like, I can't do that. I'm Captain America, and that's what leads to him to drop the shield and basically have that tear. I'm behind that moment. I hate the line, "We're losing the argument," because I'm like, your argument I think is correct.
But that's the end of the story, right? So Cap ends the story defeated, having lost the argument, and that's the intentional line that Miller wants you to walk away from. He's lost the argument, and then Tony gets to look at the bottom from his helicarrier down on all the little rubes and promise that he's going to keep bad things from ever happening again because he's Tony the Christ.
So that's what I'm saying is that the entire time, Tony's side appears to be portrayed as the bad guys, and then at the absolute last second, they flip the script on it and say, "You know what? Actually, they're the good guys."
I disagree, but I want to hear what Larry has to say.
So this whole thing is all about the war on terror. So Captain America represents the spirit of America, American freedom, love, liberty, patriotism, the rule of law, all that good stuff. And who's stopping him? The cop, the fireman, the EMT, all those people. So it's representative of how the people support the institutions of political power, and the only way to represent American freedom is to destroy the American system. And you just have to give up, like Cap did. That's how I took this framing of the story.
So
it's how we have to give up our freedom to support our government.
And we have to give it up to the elites because they're the ones that obviously should be ruling over us.
I disagree. I actually think that Mark Miller is, I think you guys are not, and I disagree in the sense that you guys aren't going far enough. This story is actually far more cynical than that. This story is so cynical that it actually believes that both sides are actually wrong. Because the end of this story, let me pull it up here. The end of story is a Watchmen ending. Because remember I mentioned that this is kind of like Watchmen being played in the Marvel Universe? Watchmen does not end with actual world peace. Watchmen ends with a world peace that's just about to be undone. And literally, this story ends with, I would say, a very intentionally over the top, oh, everything's great, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, except for the fact that we know how hollow this is. Because nowhere, and we pulled up the image earlier, but it's like, oh, we have a paradise. But this is a paradise that has been established to be built on what Sue Storm called fascism, gulag, and murder. And Mark Miller does not shy away and say any of that is justified. And so he ends the story and he kind of wants you to basically take the extra cynical step to basically go to, oh, everyone is crap. If you surrender your power to the elites, you're surrendering that power to these crappy people who are fascists who are going to put you in a gulag. And so, like I said, this fits a lot of what I would call the British invasion's super cynicism. That's one of the things. Alan Moore has come right out and said, "I am a political cynic. I am a pessimist. I see things extremely negatively. And I think that Mark Miller is taking a page out of that book here, because the end state of this story is ostensibly, oh, the best is yet to come, sweetheart, but it is with full knowledge of the fact that they have built that on utter evil. And I think the fact that they end it with that glowing sunrise is meant to highlight how hollow the ending of the story actually is. I think that's utterly intentional.
So, like I said, both sides are wrong.
Well, it's a literal hollow sphere. We have a literal hollow sphere here.
You see,
but
I
what makes
disagree.
it more hollow than this, right, is because what happens immediately afterwards is because right on like the foot of this, then we get World War Hulk, which comes in and just makes all of this meaningless. Everything that happened right before it.
You see, I disagree because Mark Millar loves the idea of these super sexy, amoral rock star superheroes that are right because they're cool
and
powerful. And powerful. So that's how
that's just another totalitarianism.
Yeah, so that's how
totalitarianism is what gets him off in all of his stories. It's always about the powerful dominating over the weak.
And if you look at the whole Jupiter's Legacy thing, is the hero who's saying, hey man, we need to live by a heroic ideal and this and that and the other thing. You know, he was brutally wrong, and he was wrong to the point that he was willing to let his son die for, you know, superior, you know, values and virtues and morals.
Well, Neostar says exactly, Twitless. So Neostar, he knows what's going on because he says I'm right. This is part of the reason why people shouldn't keep trying to recreate Watchmen in these comic book universes. I do agree with that.
And this is and Fizz points out here that why is Watchmen the gold standard in superheroes? It's really not. It's Watchmen is excellent for what it is, but it was not supposed to be and should not be read as a template within the superhero universe.
Nor should The Dark Knight Returns.
No.
Thank you.
This actually, with all of the,
I love The Dark Knight Returns, but The Dark Knight Returns is the Dark Knight Returns fits into the same category as Kingdom Come, where it's built predicated upon a failure of yesterday's heroes, right? It requires yesterday's heroes to kind of suck, and so in that it actually betrays its heroic origins. Now, if you take Dark Knight Returns by itself, right, and you say, okay, so Bruce had a failure in the past, and he's coming back from that and reclaiming his old age to build something new, and so it ends with this idea of building something new. And if you just left that alone and never touched it again, that kind of gets into some of the rebuilding the heroic arc, all that kind of stuff. But of course, Miller didn't leave it there. But
nope.
Because there's money to be made, so
it got really silly later on.
That's what makes this one even worse, right? So those stories are kind of like how the heroes of yesteryear suck, right? Like, they were doing their thing, but it was the past, and the past is bad, and we have to build on the shoulders of the past, and we can make it better. This one, on the other hand, is the heroes of today suck. And what do you do when everything that you have to do today is bad? Where do you go from there?
And so this comes back, and I agree. And that this once again, when people say, I get irritated when the comic commentariat, we are going to go 2 hours on this. I get irritated when the modern comic commentariat said that, it's 2015 is when superheroes started getting bad with all the woke stuff. And I'm like, you're a moron. That happened in 85 and you weren't paying attention. 87. But yeah, I mean, that's what this everything that we see here, the Ultimate Universe was the same story that's going on today.
It's fair to say that 2015 represented a very cognitive dissonant break that was very noticeable.
What happened in 2015 is that people started noticing what had been going on for 20 years. And I'm sorry if you're stupid, but it's been going on for 20 years.
Well, that was 2016. There was a cognitive break that was very noticeable, and maybe it was a new height that was being reached. Right. But it's
it happened in 2016. all new, all different. Marvel was the same thing. The New 52 was the same thing. The all of the crises that led up to the New 52 were the same thing. Identity Crisis was the same thing. Kingdom Come
we were talking
was the
about
same
all
thing.
New, all different.
Yeah.
There's
Only one different was 2 iterations after this.
yeah, there's an
Well,
old expression about decline that says decline happens gradually and then all at once.
All at once,
2015
right.
is the all at once moment.
It's the tipping point, right? So
Right,
we're
yeah.
putting comics on a scale, and we're like, during times of the past, it's like, was it still bad for a couple decades or so? Yeah, but were
Yeah.
there still plenty of good things you could read during that time? Sure, right? Like in the midst of this bad stuff. But then it starts piling up to where there's just far, far more bad than there's good.
And let's just come
until
right
the scale flips over and there's no
Right,
good left.
and one of the things that's a factor in that too is journalistic malfeasance, right? So these comic book journalists that had been just kissing people's butts for decades, that's just what they've done since Wizard days, all that kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden they're still kissing butts. And then some of the fans are just like, well, you're kissing butts for people that they're telling crappy stories. like One More Day was crap. What are you kissing their butts for? That was crap.
We do have to also, and I don't want to bring this up, but at the same time, like it's just the elephant in the room. 2016, pop culture basically started to surround one person in
Orange Man is bad. Are you saying Orange Man's not bad, Twitless?
I'm just saying that, like, I mean, so much of pop culture,
But
film,
the thing is,
video
games,
comics, it hit a new zenith, and it was like that we'd never seen before, where it was just utterly obsessed.
It was there.
Not at the levels that it
I think
hit.
he's saying it became an effort rather than
Not at the levels it hit.
Go back and watch, SNL from that time, from before that. It's been there for a long time. It's been a long march. It's 100 years of this stuff building up steam.
Right. But what Twitless is saying is 2016 is when they turned the dial to 11.
Yeah.
Just because like normies started noticing the accumulation of 100 years of Marxist thought.
Can I just say something?
And they can't win the argument because they don't even know that they're making Marxist arguments against it. That's the thing, is like when people start, that's what gets me so crazy. Every time starts pulling out their buzzwords or whatever, then everything's an SJW this. I mean, dude, you don't even know what you're talking about, man. Can
I just say something?
Yes.
Both of you are right, and both of you are wrong.
Oh my gosh! Thanks, Linkara.
I'm kidding.
Oh gosh.
Oh, Eagle, curse you! Why did you got to bring that crap up? I didn't realize that's a shadow. That's badass.
To be honest,
Eagle loves pulps. He's a pulp guy.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I almost feel like the whole Hail Hydra thing would actually fit better after Cap sees the people turn on him, because it would be more like he loses hope and runs away rather than just giving himself in.
You know what? My brain had actually forgotten that moment happened. Eagle, why did you have to remind me that thing?
Well, the thing about that is like,
I blissfully had like buried that in my memory.
Wasn't that not him though?
The Cap that we have right now is actually just somebody's like
memory
of Cap, and the real Cap is still the evil one.
Well, the real Cap died at the end of Civil War.
Yeah,
actually, at the beginning of Civil War,
he got brainwashed by the cosmic cube. Oh, jeez.
So
look. This is why I say Professor X brainwashed everybody, and that's why these events in Civil War happened. It's the only way for it to make sense.
He got the Mind Stone.
It's just a fever dream.
Yeah, he got the Mind Stone and got to mind wash everybody.
So, Fizz, Kingdom Come, I felt was more of an insult to 90s anti-heroes popularized by Image Comics. There definitely is that factor in it.
Do we have a Liefeld fan here?
We are going to have that conversation.
We're going to have that conversation. And part of it was about a year ago, we had a brief iteration of it because, okay, I'm going to tell the story of our Kingdom Come thing. So many years ago, I read back through Kingdom Come and I decided that it was terrible. And I had Twitless on one time. We were talking about superhero universes because we both write superheroes, and I mentioned that I think that Kingdom Come was the beginning of the end for DC, the real beginning of the end for DC. The minute anything from Kingdom Come entered the main continuity, it was destined to die. It was just death. And Kingdom Come, and Twitless said, "But I like Kingdom Come." And so I said, "Okay, well let's have a real Kingdom Come conversation. And he's like, okay, so I had him on a couple months later, and I had reread Kingdom Come, and I came up with all fire and brimstone talking about how terrible it was. And he was like, well, I haven't read it in a while. And I'm like, okay. And so then, so then a couple months later, he comes back and he's like, okay, I'm ready to counter your point with Kingdom Come. And I'm like, okay, try it. And he brings up a thought about how to read Kingdom Come from a metafictional concept. And I'm like, maybe you're right. Let me think about that.
But then it was your turn to go, I haven't read it in a while.
But I said the last time I read it was last time you were on. And I mean, that's a whole different paradigm to consider the thing in. So I got to go back and reread Kingdom. I can't believe I'm having to reread.
So the next time we're both going to have to reread Kingdom Come at like the same time, so that we can both be fresh on it.
Yeah, and I definitely think that like the hyper violence and all that kind of stuff is definitely an aspect. And one of the big questions that Kingdom Come asks is, which is the true superhero story, the Silver Age or the Pocket Era, right? And they try to dichotomize between those things. I still don't think they answer that question effectively.
You're gonna hate
in a way
me
that
for
doesn't
saying
ruin
this,
comics
but
forever.
which one was Kingdom Come again?
That was the one where
Mark Waid
and
Alex Ross did the
Ross.
art.
And it had a
Yep.
super dude say.
It's actually Alex Ross's story too. He presented the story to Waid, and Waid turned into a script. So,
Oh, good. I can actually give Alex Ross more credit than Waid. Hooray!
Most
well,
people do.
yeah.
I mean, maybe Mark Waid was responsible for all the stupid, mindless violence, and Alex Ross was the one about all the, actual heroism.
All the positive stuff.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
I will say, I went into my second reading of Kingdom Come. I could not have been more negatively prepared. I was like, I don't like Mark Waid. I'm going to hate the story. I reread it, and I was like, I was impressed by the fact that like I went in wanting to hate it.
Yeah, I went in with it skeptically. And like I've told the story on stream before, but this is one of the things. Is a number of years ago, one of my I have a website where we've done comic reviews on it and everything else. And one of my co-writers on the thing, one of the partners in our company, wrote a review of Killing Joke as a misogynist work, and it didn't ring to me. It didn't seem right. So I went back and reread it, and I realized that it's not misogynist. It's just crap. It's anti-human crap. It's palabum. It's garbage, and then it made me think. And so 21-year-old me thought Killing Joke was brilliant. So 33-year-old me was like, wait, what else did I thought was brilliant?
What else? Yeah.
So I went through all of the greats. I reread Watchmen. I reread Kingdom Come. I reread. I hadn't read Civil War, but I mean, I reread Dark Knight. And it was one of those things where like I had to reassess, what are the things that are actually speaking to heroism and truth, and what are the things that are just there are edgy or things that are like snappily well written. Because like Kingdom, I'm like from a words on paper perspective, the Killing Joke isn't terrible. Like it reads well, right?
There are parts of Civil War that read well.
Well, yeah.
Mark Miller is like I said. Mark, I'm not saying Mark Miller can't write. I've enjoyed some of his Millerverse stuff. Like I said, I think my favorite thing I've read was Super Criminal or Super Crooks, just because it's basically superheroes with Ocean's 11. He just took Ocean's 11, just put superheroes on top, and I'm like, okay, I buy this concept. It's fun.
Well, I mean, and it's one of those things where, like, I mean, to take it out of the realm of comic books, one time Stephen King was asked if he could label the difference between the Twilight books and the Harry Potter books, and he said, "Well, both of them are very derivative. They're written for a common reading level. There's nothing challenging in them, but J.K. Rowling can write a sentence." And
okay, don't make me defend Twilight.
I'm not going to.
Okay,
I will. Well, maybe I will. Maybe I will some other time.
Okay.
You were the one who tore that book apart.
Oh, it's
Twilight.
trash.
Twilight is okay up until page.
Twilight is trash
until
from
page
prologue.
1.
The prologue is garbage. Oh, it is.
Some of it works.
Hold up.
No.
Have you read Twilight from Edward's perspective?
I have not.
She wrote that.
Yeah, or half of it or anything. But anyway, moving on. So yeah, that made me rethink about this, and so that was one of those things where, when I read Kingdom Come, I was super skeptical and critical. I wasn't, not because Mark Waid, I had no opinions. That was before Mark Waid had publicly discovered Twitter, or I was on Twitter or whatever.
Sure.
So like I had no opinion of Mark Waid. Any opinion I had of him was shiny because his work on the Flash was just, and his work on Captain America in the early 90s was pretty good.
Oh, I have to rephrase what I said about Twilight. Twilight was crap until a particular page. I remember my opinion now.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Oh.
It was the prologue. Can't even use the past perfect tense to talk about when things happened before. It was garbage. It was fifth grade level writing.
At the
This
very
is how I feel
end,
about Stephen King.
at the very, very end of Twilight, I got interested in the story. And it was around the time where the hunt happens, and there were actual mechanics of like, oh, this thing happens, and then this thing interacts with this. I was challenged by a friend that if I wanted to judge Twilight, I should read the whole thing. So I was like, fair enough. So I read the whole thing. And
I've been there before.
I hated almost all of it until I think page 385. And then I was like, oh, an actual narrative with a plot happened. Yeah, I remember.
That's ridiculous.
And I was like, hey, I'm actually interested. There's some tension. There's an actual plot happening. For about 385 pages, it's oh Edward, oh Edward, oh Edward, oh Edward, in varying combinations.
I can't judge because I haven't read it, but are we sure this isn't just a case of Stockholm syndrome?
No. Yeah. I marked the moment, and I was like, I'm actually somewhat engaged. But no, it was mostly not good.
It was awful.
Can we talk for a second about art?
Yes.
Let's look at this page here. Because I am still not convinced that Greg Land did not draw some of these panels.
Okay, first off, Greg Land can draw when he wants to.
Yes, but we also know we also know what it looks like when you trace an image that wasn't meant to be what that person is doing. So what the heck is with this shot of whatever Miss Marvel is doing?
Okay, here we go.
How does this character look so flat on top of every? Oh, you're not looking at it yet? Sorry.
Yeah, it is now. It's there now.
She's flying at this guy? Why does she look like she's standing on something and then she's put at an angle? There
are some awkward poses in this book. I have to find for fun of these. I have to find. Does anyone remember the really awkward pose?
I've got so many of these I can show you.
No.
Which one?
I'll just say
the short skirt.
No. The brother and sister.
What? When they're in disguise?
No. You don't. No one remembers this. You must have blocked it out. Give me a second.
I missed it.
Let me refresh your memory on a scene that should never have been drawn.
Okay.
Here it is. I found it on my first try. Okay.
Hooray!
So here is a scene that shows up in a Marvel comic book.
I mean, we already knew they did that whole craziness with Wanda and Pietro. Oh.
Why? Who greenlit this?
Again, is it because someone traced something that had nothing to do with the context?
No, they do it twice. Like, why? What is who
this was the intended look.
Who greenlit this? Get fired.
They look like they're ice dancing.
No, it looks like they're doing the Beast with two backs.
Well,
first of all, no one greenlights anything anymore.
Ice dancing is pretty close.
They have to get it to print.
Well, all dancing is if you get down. Well, not all dancing, but lots of.
Again,
dancing.
I feel like this comes
based
from
on
a photo that is not about superheroes.
Oh, jeez.
And I can show more. Get back to mine here.
Wait. I need our audience to notice that this pose was drawn not once but twice, so it was no accident. These two are brother and sister, by the way.
Again, this could have come from a series on some
here's
photo
the thing about
website.
Here's the thing about that. This is crazy. Like from a storytelling perspective, like Sue never needs anyone to save her, right? Like her invisipowers are like super powerful.
She can kill a celestial with her invisibility powers.
Yeah.
Yeah. As Neostar
You know
said,
what?
if you're not looking at this right, it's not a good.
Okay, just okay.
It's not a good look.
Okay, what do we? What is? Okay,
Okay, so
Critique is this one.
what else do we go here?
It's a lot of weird tangents.
This
And I also
guy
like to point out that's a
punching this
horrible
guy.
Cable costume. That Cable costume is terrible.
This guy punches. That's what that. That's Cable. Wow, didn't realize that.
That's
He
Cable.
punches
Also-
this green guy on the.
Oh, he looks
arm.
like he looks like he's going to the gym.
Why? Because somebody drew this picture and then drew this picture and layered them on top of it. And because this guy's arms are awkwardly sticking out for no reason, you can't actually make it look like he's punching him in the torso or the face or anywhere that would make sense.
Like, also, why is Radioactive Man 10 feet tall?
Yeah, it's a good question.
There
I don't
are
have an
size differences that don't make sense. Everything looks like it's layered on top of something.
Probably because it is. This is early 2000s.
Because it was traced.
Or no, 20. Is this 2015? So it's not quite that old.
Honestly,
But I
the only
feel
two
like
people
it's
that
like these
look like they
characters were
belong
traced
together is Wonder Man and
individually.
Herc.
Yeah, that does actually work. Amazing.
Well, I mean, I think Giant Man and Yellow Jacket don't look like they're.
Yeah,
They don't. With the
because
rest
they
of
actually
the
look like
scene,
they're touching
but-
each other.
Yeah.
No,
They make
probably
sense.
are layered on top.
And who's stature kicking there?
No, she's kicking. Oh
I
gosh,
guess.
is that
I don't
Actually,
even know that character.
who is that? That looks like Hawkeye when he was being Goliath. Remember when Hawkeye had Giant Man powers? Clint had a stint as
Yeah,
Was that-
I
Giant Man.
remember that.
Wait, is that supposed to be Scott Lang? Is she kicking her own dad in the face?
No. Twitless thinks, and I think that's actually Hawkeye is Giant Man, or who's
Hawkeye
the
was
guy
Ronin at this time?
I don't
then
know,
who's the guy from Thunderbolts who was a Giant Man?
Yeah.
Might be the Thunderbolt one because I don't. It looks.
Yeah.
After Rob Liefeld, I have lost track of how many Marvel characters have this mask style with the hair sticking out.
Yeah, the headgear. Yeah.
Out of curiosity, has Wonder Man ever had a solo or miniseries? I believe he did in the 80s. I think he had 2 minis in the 80s. I might be wrong about that.
I think I remember reading them in the 80s.
Yeah. I've seen him in pull bins. I haven't ever grabbed him, but I've seen him in quarter bins and stuff. Neo's asking if it's Atlas.
Yeah, that's the guy
I'm
from
looking. It
that's the guy
kinda
from
looks like
Thunderbolts.
Atlas. You
That's
just
the guy
have to
from
like
Thunderbolts.
wash his colors to all be the same. Like if you make them all red, because his outfit is kind of actually pretty colorful. He's got like red, yellow, blue.
I think
on
you're
it.
right. Yeah.
You know.
I'm not familiar with that character, but
So number one, it's terrible if your character's in this shot because we're able to tell who everybody else is in the shot. So that's a bad decision from a design standpoint. And also his statures, their heights don't seem to make any sense relative to Giant Man and Giant Yellow Jacket's
Yeah.
height.
yeah, there's some.
I'd
There's some
also
awkward
like to
posing
point
in
out
this
that one of the other things that frustrates me about this story is this is yet the second time that Hank Pym has made a giant killer robot that killed people. So
Well,
he
Mr.
makes Ultron,
Fantastic.
he makes
Fan-
but it's still Hank is,
Yeah,
is
it's
intimately
true.
involved in designing it. It was,
Look, it's okay
Yeah,
because
it's
the
just what
government
Hank
told me
does.
to.
Here's what I think is funny. You know, it's a problem when your superheroes start having kill counts on par with Doctor Doom.
Yeah.
Look,
You know-
Hank, we
Well,
need
so
you
this
to
started
make.
with Pym early on though. Like he's even gone through like the villain phase before as
Yeah.
well. Like
Mm.
he
Well,
is
and then, like-
definitely not a clean slate.
Well, I mean, that's part of the thing is, and then like that he got painted that way, from one story, and then it like starting in like 1987, everything everyone does with Hank Pym is tainted by, except the Ant-Man movie, but everything is done with in the comics has been tainted by the idea that he slapped somebody one time, so that.
Yeah, it's kind of like how Iron Man ended up after this story, or actually half these characters after this story just ended up the way they were in this story.
Unfortunately, this also led to a trend of the only way to fix this is through a pure like reset retcon, or to basically just pretend, just ignore it And basically what ends up happening is you get characters who might name drop this once or twice, but then 5 or 10 years afterwards, they're back to getting along like nothing ever happened. And they just kind of ignored that this whole huge genre defining event where people died never happened. And it's like, there are like, think back to the Thanksgiving dinners where you never talk to a relative because of like a bad joke that happened, or they don't talk to you.
I don't have dinners with those relatives.
What I'm saying is the fact that real life relationships.
Maybe that's because I still hold grudges about the Norman invasion.
Well, the point I'm trying to make is that real life relationships are actually really fragile. And the fact that these superhero characters are ignoring, like basically killing each other about a couple of years afterwards, and people now will eventually forget that Carol Danvers ran a super secret gulag herself.
Right.
It's like,
right.
and that's the only
things,
way you can get past it.
And that's one of those things that, like, the last 15, maybe even 20 years of Marvel, one of the ways they've tried dealing with the rotating timeline, right? Is that as time moves on, certain events from the past just fall off. They'll stop being talked about in
like House of M,
right? They're talking. I was listening to Thinking Critical last week, and they're talking about the Trial of Magneto, and they bring up House of M in Trial of Magneto, so that one's not over yet.
And it was Scarlet Witch is on way too many teams and on like speaking terms with people she should never be on speaking terms with. If you basically commit a mutant genocide, which basically puts you as the mutant version of, I don't know, Hitler, I don't think you get invited to any X-Men related function ever again. I just think you don't meet the list. Oh, hey, Scarlet Witch, I know that you eliminated our species, but, we need to fight Galactus. So, let's...
Well, I got to say, Neo, and subject to literally murdering Iron Man, I think that's a net positive at this point. So
let me bring it back to the fact that at least when Jean Grey, when Jean Grey ate a son, there was some concept. Jim Shooter said you cannot let Jean get away with this. She's gonna have to die. And Chris Claremont went, no, I will just reset things. And Jim Shooter said, no. Storm is never gonna sit down at Thanksgiving dinner with Jean Grey if she killed 1 billion people. I'm sorry. And Chris Claremont went, Meh, and then he did it, and then later on said, you know what? Jim was right. The story turned out better because of it. So I feel like there needs to be, people have said this before, there needs to be at least some editorial oversight that has at least a little bit of Jim Shooter in them to,
right. And that's the thing you look at now, like that has eclipsed. They've even though that's still canon, they've removed the things from that with bringing Jean back.
I'm okay with bringing Jean back, but she had to die. In the first place. So what I'm saying is that
wasn't that when she was taken over?
Doesn't matter. It's like you can't have this character.
The thing about the Phoenix Force, and that's one of the things like with the Echo thing that's going on right now. It's weird, but the thing about the Phoenix Force is it's an entity and an intelligence, but it's not like completely autonomous, right? Like it's like alcohol. It's a force multiplier for bad ideas, but those ideas are present within people, and so that's one of the things about it. It's not.
Yeah, well, they even go on several times that there are like more compatible hosts for the Phoenix Force in which they wouldn't do horrible things. So like, it really is just a projection of what Jean might have the capacity to do if she wasn't otherwise restricted.
She absolutely did. Her clone did a lot of the same kind of shit.
Yeah.
Setting that aside, because like Jean Grey has a special spot in my heart, and I think I hate it when people do her dirty. But setting that aside, narratively speaking,
who really got done dirty? I'm going. Madeline Pryor got done way dirtier than Jean. That's a fact. That's a fact.
I don't often compliment anime. I'm just saying, in any anime, the way this would go down was that someone would have to enter the Phoenix and find Jean, floating in some completely black atmosphere so that they can save her
they
from this fate.
there was
right?
there was some like there at least from an imagery perspective, I think they toyed with some imagery similar to that. Anyway, so the point is the fact that there was some like the character who is guilty of that level of infraction had to die. Whether or not they got brought back is immaterial. And in fact, the only way to have that character back in the story is to bring them back after they've died. Because
And how long was it when they actually brought Jean back?
It was a while. Like she was dead for a while, and like they brought her back and they killed her again. They brought her back and killed her again, but she was basically
ironically.
She was on or off
consistently
dead.
being reborn and then killed.
Yeah, right.
Like,
she was on or off dead for a while, because Grant Morrison had the hots for the blonde.
She came back like permanently during the X-Force series in the 80s when it was the original 5.
No, it was X Factor.
X Factor. Yeah, that's right. I got the name wrong. Thank you.
Now, I forgot though. What are we comparing this to? Is it Tony Stark? We're saying,
yeah, right. So I'm trying to say that, like, what I'm trying to say is that, like, when you have characters like Reed Richards, who basically commits some pretty horrible, crimes, even if he had what he thought was a reason. I mean, Reed should have some real consequences that last here, like maybe going to jail. Like if you sent Reed Richards to his own gulag, right? For some of the things that he's done and had him serve a sentence and come out afterwards through that experience, I would be more willing to accept, him back into the status quo. Cause it's like, you had to go through some stuff because of what you did.
And especially if you can have a character arc where he deals with those demons and actually has to get over and forgive himself for it.
Yeah. And I feel like, they don't do as bad. Well, they do technically. They kill Captain America after this, and I think Tony Stark technically dies for a time after this. But I don't know if it's correctly.
I think that's then later on. I think this is he dies and then gets reborn as his teenage self for a while, and.
But I don't know if it's directly.
No, that was Onslaught. Was when he was his teenage self. When he dies in this setup, he gets reborn because he builds a machine to cheat death.
Okay.
So he gets his brain rebooted or something, right?
Into a clone body he made of himself.
Okay. But like that, I think that's because this leads into Dark Reign eventually, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So like Tony's in charge, and then Norman gets to be in charge. So like eventually,
they have the shield and hammer, and
eventually,
Dark Avengers.
Yeah, eventually Civil War does set the stage for that power to be used by very evil people. So again, I would say that I think that Mark Miller is. And people after him were aware of what they were setting up. I just think that at the end of the day, this is an extremely violent and cynical comic. And it feels like it has none of the Marvel spirit that we have grown up enjoying. Yeah. And that's one of the things that really leaves a very sour taste in my mouth with the story. It's just a very cynical, just pessimistic view of humans and superheroes and the world, and the ending is super negative and pessimistic under a guise of being kind of like positive, and the story itself is mired in cynicism, and it's like, hooray, superheroes. I love my cynicism with my superheroes.
And like it gets followed up with like almost even like a classical thing, right? Again, because World War Hulk happens after this, and he comes back, and he's basically just a force of nature. He's like an unstoppable force that is just a thing of judgment. Yeah, he's like just a force of judgment that comes and just murders a bunch of people that deserve it from his perspective.
I will say World War Hulk does lead to one of my favorite moments in all of comics, which is where he punts Monica Rambeau into New Jersey.
That's funny,
I hate Monica Rambeau, and she says, "I'm like indestructible," and he says, "Good for you. Go be indestructible in New Jersey." And he just drop kicks her, and it's like the best thing I've ever read. Aside from that,
I like Hulk being a little bit smarter than the classic Hulk we think of.
Oh, tactical Hulk, that's neat. Yeah,
he gets ridiculously smart in World War Hulk.
Oh yeah,
he is outsmarting people. Yeah. He is having full-out conversations. He knows what New Jersey is.
Sorry, we cut Larry off.
I've not read World War Hulk, but I do know that like in the old the original Hulk comics, he was verbal. He wasn't intelligence, but he was like, and he wasn't brilliant, but he was a brute. He wasn't a moron.
Really?
I kind of
it was far more Jekyll
Yeah.
and Hyde.
I
Far more
prefer
Jekyll
that.
and Hyde. In the old days.
I kind of like World War Hulk. I have not read it recently. I could reread it and hate it, but like I don't know. There's things I
Maybe
like.
we oughta
There's the one thing I did like
do this
about
follow up and read World War Hulk if we can get our hands on it. Maybe that's something we ought to do.
Well, what
there's one thing-
I remember hating it.
oh,
my whole perspective on World War Hulk is it was the first time where I really felt sympathetic for the Hulk versus the government. For years, we're like, oh, the mean government's after the Hulk. No, the Hulk is a giant destructive force of nature. Of course, the U.S. military is trying to stop him from hurting people. This time, the Hulk was justified in what he was doing, and that was weird.
Well, see, and I grew up on the TV show, on reruns of the TV show. So the idea that that if he was just left alone, he probably wouldn't hurt people so much.
I just love the fact that he gets to slap Sentry around, because Sentry is one of the worst fan fiction characters ever interjected into Marvel continuity.
I
And
do
so
agree with that.
Seeing him get,
I've never understood the love people have. For Sentry.
oh my
I
gosh.
don't. It was
hold on. I need to double check this. here.
World War Hulk got to see them getting a Sentry knocked about, and I'm like, yay!
That's another thing we could do a whole show on, talking about just the terrible idea that is Sentry.
To remind myself that guy.
He's Superman.
It's Superman, but who got his powers from superheroine.
Yeah,
It's
no,
the
it's
power
worse. It's
of a million suns.
But Larry, remember that they end up retconning it to be even worse than that, because he gets his power initially from superheroine, and then he gets his power from Judeo-Christianity.
Oh God, I forgot about that.
Yeah, I know your
What?
brain. Your brain.
I don't think I knew
protected
that.
you. Your brain protected you from that.
Well, and
But
like
I
the
remember.
the premise of the Sentry was that, like, the way it was is that he was when I first heard the idea, I thought it was kind of clever from like a meta perspective, was that he was a golden age character and the first real superhero in the universe, but he got so powerful that they plucked him out of the universe and everyone forgot about him because he became a menace.
Baby's first fan fiction.
Yeah. And so it's like the
dance
Kazam
plot
where,
come
like,
up with him. No, the kid's
some people remember that there might have been something, but there's no recollection of it. And so then he appears somehow, he gets unlocked from the nothing, and he appears in the modern day, and he's just like this crazy homeless. Oh my God, he's me. And he's and it slowly comes to himself and realizes that that he had been punted from existence, and he's got to decide whether he's going to take vengeance or look for something greater. And so there's this conflict of energies within him. But
also, this was another example of evil Reed Richards, because it was Reed Richards who made the machine with Doctor Strange's help to wipe him from everybody's memory.
I mean, there's a lot of cool concepts.
Like I
in
said,
Sentry.
if you
That's the
ever
problem. He's like a
need-
very mixed bag of things.
Anytime you just need someone to invent something ridiculous, you just automatically turn to Reed Richards.
By the time they hit
And
dark, by the time
But
they
not
hit
a
dark
cure for
rain,
cancer, though.
yeah, right. By the time they hit Dark Reign and they pulled the whole like he's the angel of death from Exodus, I was like, I'm out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and now he
Well, hold
actually
on.
literally has a pocket dimension inside of him that has all of those exploding suns constantly going off, and that's where his power is actively from.
Yeah.
that's the dumbest goddamn thing I've ever. I came up with our super. Okay, in our universe, our Superman. Let me pull out my comic here. Our Superman is powered by Aladdin's lamp, right? And he's super strong and he's super fast and can transmutate things.
Is he Chinese?
No, he's not. He's an American who discovers the lamp in Iraq, and it has a whole history that he doesn't know about, and he has a very short career. But this is what I wanted for our universe, to have our Superman.
Oh my gosh!
the first one.
I just looked it up. The creator of the Sentry is another one of that British invasion.
Who was it?
Paul Jenkins.
Paul Jenkins. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, he and Bill Jamis were tight. That was in the Jamis era that came out.
Oh my gosh!
But this is so like when I talk about a stupid Superman replacement, I mean, I came up with one, and I still love this guy.
I thought it was cool.
His name's Al Jin. That's the thing, right?
I like
it's supposed to be intentionally over the top with the golden age sensibility. That's what I wanted with it.
I like Al Jen. He's a cool character.
He's super fun.
Pick up Zing Comics. It's really good.
Yeah. So this is, you can't right now. I don't have it for sale.
Just drive to Nebraska and pick up a copy.
Fix it. I'm gonna try to fix it over Christmas break. Anyway, point being, I thought my idea was a little over the top.
Oh no, Sentry's retarded.
And the thing is, in some ways, because of how ridiculous he is, he only gets better and worse at the same time. It's not even one direction. It's just like you're stretching the rubber band back as far as it can possibly go, and it just never snaps. You never get the satisfying snap.
It would be one thing like okay, so Superman in all of his incarnations is ridiculous, right? But in terms of like power set and everything else, but what makes Superman great, and we're gonna in January I want to have a talk. I want to have a panel talking about the nature of patriotic heroes. Okay, and I'm setting up the table for that to come in. But one of the things that makes Superman great is that he's got this core of belief in people, right? This idea of truth, justice, the American way, right? This idea that there's something we're striving for. There's something worthy in humans. There's something, worth protecting. There's something worth engaging. All that kind of stuff. So he's got this philosophical core. Even in the Silver Age, when you got Superman as a dick, that's offset by the fact that of all that kind of stuff. So the ridiculousness is offset by something that's very grounded, and so it fits really well. But if you've got somebody who's like literally powered by a million suns
that he got from super heroin.
But there's nothing to it, right? He's just a cipher. Then what are you doing, man?
So someone on line once recently posted that Marvel has at least 5 Superman knockoffs, and most of them are villains.
There's Gladiator.
To which
There's
I replied,
Sentry.
okay, yeah, let's name them.
Gladiator's pretty cool.
Blue Marvel.
Hyperion.
Thor.
Also other Hyperion.
Uh-huh.
I think there's more than that.
Captain Marvel.
Maybe.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, Captain Marvel functions the same way. It's on like cosmic radiation than solar, but he's functionally the same character.
Neither he nor she have the level of power that Superman has. They can be knocked out by a
I mean, it was kind of close back with the original Captain Marvel. I mean, he was able to go like toe to toe with empowered Thanos,
and he was an alien.
Yeah.
All right. To which I replied,
I guess I'm talking about like Carol Danvers because she could get she could get.
No, I'm talking about
not
Marvel.
nowadays.
He was like cracked when you actually look at some of the stuff he did.
Okay, so take a look at this picture.
Hold on.
I hate to say it. Well, let me finish. Let me finish my thought here. So when you look at the two sides here, this is hilariously unbalanced from a game design perspective because like 3 or 4 of the characters on the right hand side can take on like 90% of what's on the left. Like Sentry himself can pretty much handle like everyone on the left hand side by himself. And then you put in like Doc Samson, She-Hulk, and Carol Danvers. Not even mentioning Tony Stark. I'm just talking about just the fact that like Sentry is like a
Carol Danvers
team up.
has that Carol Danvers.
Where is she?
Yeah, she's right up.
The right.
She's right up
in
front,
the black.
and she has Scarlett Johansson's face.
Oh.
So yeah, I'm just saying that like when they have this fight, it's just this is another thing I don't like about this book is that there's a lot of characters in it, but they don't do a very good job of actually showing what these characters fighting would actually look like. Because like I said, Sentry is like you need everyone on the Avengers to have a chance of like standing a chance. Yeah. And then he is flanked by like several characters who are of similar or also superpower. And on the left, you've got
the person who gets a chance against him is like Hercules could probably actually just beat up Sentry. Because like the only person close to him was Thor, and Thor, was dead.
Now, do you remember that Sentry killed Ares? So
yes, I'm familiar with that, but Hercules had already beaten Ares before that too.
Yeah, Hercules is stronger than Ares.
Okay. So yeah, but aside from Herc, like that's about it.
That's it.
Yeah, like I'm
Again-
sorry, Daredevil's not going to have. He's not going to do squat to like Doc Samson. Nope. She-Hulk. Nope. Carol Danvers. Probably not. There's
Susan
so
there.
many members on the left that would just like do nothing to what's on the right.
Yeah.
Again, there's so many shots here that look like they were traced from completely irrelevant shots and photoshopped together.
So, what was the point you were going to go on about evil Superman?
No, what I was going to say is my response is that the person said there are at least 5 Superman knockoffs in Marvel, and most of them are villains. I responded, DC has at least 5 Superman knockoffs, and most of them are Superman.
Well, there's
true.
I mean, even in the current mainline universe, you've got Majestic Superman. You've got Apollo.
Captain Marvel / Shazam.
Captain Marvel. Yep.
I thought
Black Adam.
I thought you were just talking about
Black
just like Reign of the Superman.
Docs. What's his name? The Daxamites. Almost all of them, but especially oh, come on, Mon-El. Yeah.
Formerly known as Valor.
Valor. Yes, I was trying to remember Valor.
But don't forget also Superboy, Supergirl, Superwoman, Superdog, Super Horse.
Super Horse isn't canon anymore.
Chinese Superman.
Yeah.
We had Chinese Superman, who I actually liked that DC Chinese franchise continuity. That was actually mildly interesting, especially what they did with Batman.
Silver Age Superman, Superboy Prime.
Oh my gosh! Don't need that was garbage. I don't
Superman from Earth 2.
But another thing I hate about this picture is
Samson. Actually, that's a good point.
The other thing I hate about this picture is the two characters that are lined up with each other, like across the line. Like there's not like a thematic conflict between the characters that are crisscross from each other, except for Tony and Steve.
Well, because I think they were all just layered together randomly.
And Steve's pose isn't great either. He's just standing there, pretty like that's not a good pose.
Actually, it kind of looks like Tony and Steve are both awkwardly asking about who's going to ask who to dance. They're just like
they look like they're paper dolls cut out and slapped together with who aren't actually in an actual pose. Like that really artificial posing,
right?
Like they're like a model essentially.
So we've talked about so much about how nobody's character motivations make sense in this book, right?
Yes.
You know how when you're on the playground and you start picking teams with team captains and randomly people end up on the 2 teams? Is it?
No, what happened is that Steve got to pick Tony got to pick all the good people on his team, and I don't know what Steve was thinking. I'll take Kate Bishop, and then Tony said, "Okay, sure, Steve. I'm gonna pick Sentry."
that actually works out really well because this Steve is a super moron. So
yeah.
So who got picked last?
Probably Kate Bishop.
Probably Kate Bishop.
Punisher got picked last.
The Punisher picked himself, and everyone was like, "Okay, we're just not going to argue."
Yeah.
That was one of the things I didn't get on earlier in the thing, and we probably got to think about wrapping up. I
could respect the Human Torch pick,
Wow.
though. Human Torch has knocked out Galactus before. Like, I could respect that pick.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's like looking at like Cloak is ridiculously powerful too, except for all of his emotional problems.
Yeah.
That's I mean, if he was, I mean, like you look at like the similar character from DC, Obsidian, has almost the same power set, and Obsidian has taken over planets before.
Cloak also has really weird weaknesses though. Like you're just like sonic power, and he's out.
No, I mean, it's because and also he's just like he and Dagger have weird emotional issues.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they make sense in the story, but they limit his ability straight power. But anyway, one of the things that I could not get over was the inclusion of Punisher in Civil War, because Punisher, that was one of the most out of character things.
Allow me.
Punisher did Punisher things in Civil War. Punisher wouldn't have chosen sides. He wouldn't have acknowledged this was going on. This is all beneath Punisher's notice. Every single piece of it.
So I could maybe imagine a role for Punisher here. I will say this though, considering this is Mark Miller, Punisher gets to kill a bunch of people and blow up their heads, specifically when he blows up Jack-o'-lantern and whatever his face, the toy guy. And
then
so,
2 others later in just pure cold blood, just because they're villains.
Right. I'm just saying that, like, in particular with the head explosion, which I was mentioning, Mark Miller, like, I think is in particular love with, and it's like, oh, that's why Punisher's here, so he can blow up people's heads.
And then he has the nerve to say this.
Yeah, let me take this off here.
I liked that line.
In what universe does Punisher have anything to do with Captain America?
So
it's because Punisher was a Marine.
Yeah. So
and ultimately,
actually,
they're kind of like two sides of the same coin, because they're both for Veritas and Equitas. That's the root of what their goals are. They just do it in different ways.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I think I believe, if I'm remembering right, there was an episode of Ask Chuck Dixon where Chuck was asked about this interplay. And Chuck has pretty much the same opinion I had of it, where like there's no way that Punisher would be involved in any kind of team ups, because that's stupid. But that Frank growing up in New York, that he can see a world in which Frank had a specific affection for the legacy of Captain America.
Definitely.
But he wouldn't. This scene would never happen because they would never interact, because Frank doesn't interact with people.
I think the most you get is Frank would agree with Cap's side, but then just go off and do his own thing. Yeah. Like he might give like a philosophical agreement, and then he would just be gone.
And no one would ask him either, because I mean, like Frank is as dangerous as the people he puts away, right? I mean, that's
I could see it.
To me, this whole scene,
I could see it if they did it in the way where Frank was like, wow, I really look up to Captain America. Captain America needs some help. And like, if he was that angle, and I think that was kind of the angle they were trying to do, but like the way the main book is set up, it's so fragmentary. Because like there's the scene with him with the ski mask on, and then later on he says, well, I've been like covering up your tracks, and it's like, no, you haven't. What are you talking about? And they're trying to do too much in this book, so they have to skip scenes that would be very important.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying, I can
might be sniping people from a distance, but I mean, he wouldn't be involved in all this.
I could see it if it's
Tencent Story's got it right there. He's too many drug dealers still. He doesn't have time for this nonsense.
I think if there were more connective tissue scenes between, I really need to help Cap, I could maybe see it more.
I don't get,
and I think those scenes were meant to be in here, but they're not. They're cut or something.
I don't get where he supposedly looks up to Captain America. His entire motivation has always been that he's been betrayed by everything and everybody, and that includes the U.S. government and the military. He is out there waging a single one-man war based on revenge and nothing else. There's nothing that tells me this guy should be looking at him and, Captain America, he fights for freedom. I love him.
No, that's not it. It's the military.
No, they fight for the same thing. It's Veritas and Equitas. They fight for truth and justice, just in different ways.
If you were
two sides of the same coin.
If you're a Marine, like they established, because Frank Castle's a Marine, right?
Yeah.
Okay. If you establish his character as being a Marine,
Army, but
he would idolize Captain America, because there are lots of people in the military who idolize Captain America, and he's a fictional character. If Captain America were real, I could definitely see Frank Castle idolizing him, even if he didn't like agree with every his person.
There's also a lot of people in the military that idolize Frank Castle, whether they should or shouldn't.
Oh, that's fair.
There's a big overlap there.
But this entire scene feels like it's just another way of making Cap look bad by saying, oh, look at that. Even Castle is more honorable than you now.
I don't think they were making that point.
Well, I think Castle is too crazy at this point. I mean, I think
my problem fundamentally.
I'm sorry.
No, sorry. You go ahead.
Yeah, I think Castle being involved may well be Miller's way of putting dirt in Cap's eye, because he agrees with Cap and he's clearly a madman in the story.
My fundamental problem is that Frank Castle's a character who should have been retired in the 1990s. He's not been relevant since then, and and they haven't really done anything good with Steve Rogers since the 80s / early 90s with Wade's run.
Mm-hmm. So I actually don't agree with that either.
I think they've been struggling to find a good use for Cap in the comics for years.
The stories just before this, right, when they reintroduced Bucky, there was a really fun Cap run that was in the Marvel Knights series, and it was Cap versus terrorists. That was a lot of fun.
So I agree.
And then after this, they had, when Cap came back, which was itself a fun, wacky, over the top story. They had Secret Avengers, and that was a fun series for like the first year. And so I think they've used Steve Rogers, but the thing is they're not committing to anything. They won't let Steve be Cap unless he's totally not Cap. And they keep trying to replace him temporarily with people that aren't fitting the bill. And I think he's just been misused, and I think it stems back to this story. I think this story is really what sets that up.
I agree with Rhys and Larry, both of you on different levels. I would say that I definitely think that both Cap and Punisher have a place. I would also say that I agree with Larry in the sense that current Marvel writers really struggle with those characters because of what they represent, and how people who often have, let's just face it again, people who completely hate everything that Captain America stands for and everything that the Punisher embodies. And so suddenly those people really struggle when it's like, hey, Ta-Nehisi Coates, write Captain America. And it's like, well, I hate everything Captain America stands for. So like, yeah, I think you're right. They do struggle because it's like, what do you do with a character that you utterly despise when you have to write them? And you either have to be a really good writer and you can separate yourself from the character and write them in the mode they're supposed to be written. Like I said, Kurt Busiek has at time, he's been able to, writers like him have been able to go, you know what, I may not agree politically with this character, but this is how this character actually behaves. And so I'm going to write that character the way that they would actually behave. And then you get people, writers who say, I can't stand this character, so I'm going to write him the way I want him to be. Mm-hmm. And as much as people appraise Denny O'Neil, he did the exact same thing with Steve Ditko's The Question. So, like, there's definitely a tradition of people getting handed characters and being utterly unable to write them in any way the way they should be written. So that's definitely a writing thing.
If you're gonna do that, you should more try to put them through an arc where they have to learn rather than just flipping the switch on them.
Yeah. And Ditko's Question died. I mean that then he never came back. I think that's the Justice League Unlimited Question was pretty close, but
he was cool.
Yeah.
The older I get, the more I like that character.
He's
freaking awesome.
I think there's something to be said for that, but I think there's definitely something to be said for that. But I mean, also like the way Denny wrote Green Arrow utterly changed the way Green Arrow was interpreted as well. But at the same time, I don't think that like that was a bad thing, because Green Arrow had just been a Batman clone, and then Denny gave him a personality. So,
well, I'm just saying that when I picked up that first, I don't know, it felt really wrong when I was reading some of his Question stuff, and it was just like, you're just taking this character and you're just doing whatever the hell you want with him because you don't agree with
I don't think it was even so much that he didn't agree with Ditko. I think he just was wanting to look at it. I mean, he had his own take on it, but I don't necessarily think it was a philosophic reason.
Well, I think this is also
I
where
think he
editors
had-
come in, right? Is that
Yeah.
a lot of people see a character and is like, well, I don't really care what this character's been doing. This is what I want to do with the character. And an editor to be like, but that's not what the character's doing. So you can kind of do some of like what you want to do, but I'm going to rein you in to make sure you're doing it right.
So Alan Moore, I think, very much did not like Ditko's, worldview. But when he represented his version of a Ditko character, he pretty much was like, he committed to it. When he takes Rorschach, he's like, this is how Rorschach would behave, and he ended up writing a character who he didn't like that everyone else did.
So little fun little note that I think maybe we'll end the show on. 10-Cent Story says, I love that Jerry Conway acted like military and police officers aren't supposed to like the Punisher or wear his patch. Then those people even know who Jerry Conway is. That's awesome.
Yeah.
and just a little reminder for those of us artists who get big britches. Once the idea leaves your pen, it's not your idea anymore. It belongs to the world. So
don't say that. That hurts my
No,
gut.
it's not once it leaves your pen. It's once it leaves your desk. Right?
Yeah.
Because you can keep it in the desk in the
Right,
drawer
that's
as long
right.
as possible, and it's yours. But once you put it
Fine.
out there,
you gotta wreck the poetry of what I said for the sake of the scientific accuracy of the statement. Yeah, procedurally, you're right. God,
Yeah.
I was using it as a metaphor.
Technically, Metal, you can
shoot my metaphor.
you can shut the door to your
You could,
office
yeah.
where you keep your desk. So it's actually when the story reaches editorial.
publisher.
Yeah.
And
Well,
it- and
today,
actually, not even
leaving
then,
your desk
when
could be it because
when
it's
it
all
actually hits
digital.
the newsstand or the sales
Yeah.
clerk or whatever.
Everything's digital
Hello, it's
now.
all digital now. Whoa.
Who uses a pen?
Now you realize what you guys just did was basically legitimize Rule 34.
No,
Rule
that's-
34 legitimizes itself. It exists
Yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you, Cartoonicus, for that image, Mister. Oh, I can't stand the storms. Oh, that pose
we
is
go.
so awkward.
Here we go. Neville's nailed it. Big action
Yeah.
energy to close this stream out.
Actually,
I was going to close it on a metaphor, and instead we just closed it with a big actually. Folks,
That's
this
why
has
I'm
been-
here.
This has been an extra long matriarchy.
This
2 weeks in a row. I
Oh.
did not know we'd get 3 hours out of this topic. I should have known better. But
I mean,
thanks
was
so
it,
much
what,
for coming
7,
on.
8 issue.
This is the second time this week I've been dissuaded from signing with the publisher. Yeah.
Glad we could help.
Glad we
Yeah,
can help.
glad- yeah.
Hopefully, as
You're
long
welcome.
As you find success, do that, whatever that takes, man. So, oh yeah, Alan Moore didn't expect his least favorite creation to be so popular. That's true. Alan Moore could not stand Rorschach,
yep.
and yet he created the only honest character in Watchmen was Rorschach.
Hmm.
Which is
He's
hilarious.
he's definitely the best.
Yeah. So, next week, we don't know. We're running out right now. What we're talking
Something
about?
Christmassy?
No, something westerny. We're looking at doing a genre review of westerns and comics, and we don't have all of our panel
sounds
figured
fun.
out yet. So yeah, hopefully that'll be fun.
We should do a Christmas comic though. We can do the yeah. There's definitely
Maybe.
some
I guess
Christmas comics.
maybe
We could do Santa Doom.
Oh no! Actually, that would be awesome.
Yeah, and Fizz is correct. Mike Barron and Chuck Dixon worked together to really define.
Can
the
you actually
conversation.
find that online?
So, anyway, but yeah. So next week, that's the story. Normally I guess the people want to shill stuff real quick.
Yeah, give me a second.
So I will go ahead here with Cartoonicus and Twitless on here. I'd be remiss to not mention their superhero comedy, superschool.com. It's free. There's bunches of it. Go read it. And then if you want to see something that's not as pretty but better,
Oh,
you can check out forcegoodevil.net.
Oh,
Yeah.
snap.
It's got more pathos. It's got I think better laughs, but the art quality is not near as good. And there's all that kind of stuff. But that maybe that's me talking since it's my baby. Oh, hey. Well, that's not what I meant to do.
Oh.
Hit the wrong thing. Cartoonicus has shared his DeviantArt, which is down in the chat. So there you go. Check that out. Metal, what you been up to these days?
Just working on the same stuff. If anybody wants to read something that is definitely full of philosophy, whether you can initially see it or not, but will leave you confused in the most pleasant of ways, you could go over to xdynamuschaos.com or any of the places that I mirror and read my stories. Yeah,
link is in the description for xdynamuschaos.com.
I've actually been backlogged on pages. Like I've got a bunch I need to scan because I lost the power adapter for my scanner in the move, so I'm just waiting for a new one to come in. Still inking away though, so I'm ahead. I can just go back and digitally color them afterwards.
Nice. And Larry, if you guys don't know, Larry was writer on the second volume of Wild Tales of Kyrie. And I didn't have his link because I didn't know he wanted on this stream. I couldn't remember who else asked about it, and I couldn't find it. So there you have it. I did get you. You're not in the description. I'll fix that later.
Right, and I'm currently working on my next project with Matt. We're currently working on the second draft of the project.
It's a spy thriller, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm actually having to write a story Bible because we may be getting an artist working on the project who English is their third language. So we're gonna need, to possibly bulk up some details there.
Nice. The internet brings us all together.
You're gonna have to give me some links on that. I love spies.
Yeah, if you actually got Wild Tales of Kyrie, there was a teaser image for it in the comic.
And so yeah, that's the story, I think. And you can support me. Not really me. It goes back to the company, goes out to the artist. Ideal Comics Patreon right there.
All right.
Where we try to put up new stuff. I'm a little behind on putting up some new stuff on there. But we'll be putting some stuff up here the next couple weeks. Dropping a bunch of our reworked pages from Z-Bytes as we get ready for the new printing of all that. So zombie comedy, and then we'll have some more superhero stuff, and who knows what else. But yeah, that's what we're about at the minute. So I'm exhausted actually, and so we're gonna sign out. Hey, until next time, keep reading comics. And next time's next week. So, you've got yourself 7 days to read some comics. Later, everybody.
Stay tuned.
Later.
Bye.